It's YNK, so since I stole all of Thorin's gigs, at the very least, what you guys can do is subscribe to his YouTube channel, so go on and do it right now.
Okay, this is episode 51 of Counterpoints. We're back. That's right, we've actually done, I think this will be our second show in like a 2.5 week span or something. That's not bad.
No, we've gotten back on the horse, Doc. It doesn't matter that we fell off. All that matters is that we're back on it and we keep moving forward.
Exactly. Speaking of which, Launders' career.
Moving forward.
Yeah, back on the horse, moving forward.
Yeah, able to travel finally. Feels good. America's awesome, but not leaving for a year and a half is a little strange. So
how'd you enjoy California? Good?
California's nice. Have you spent some like extended period of time here?
I was born out in SoCal.
Oh, and then you moved to where? Michigan?
No, then I moved to Texas, and then I moved to Florida, and now I'm in Michigan.
Okay. All right. Well, I love California. That's good.
What a fucking mess.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Just slowly went downhill.
And then had a nice 6-year stretch around college in Chicago. So I've been all over.
Yeah, Moses' dad used to sell the best snake oil, but they used to run him out of town every few months, and they never could go back. Like, what the fuck? Why are we just moving constantly?
I mean, it was my dad's work. That obviously wasn't snake oil. I don't know. Yeah.
No, we all know the only person in esports that sells snake oil is Weldon Green, the former analyst / coach of TSM. It's such a niche reference. He's not even in CS:GO.
I was going to say that's not a bad reference at all. No one's going to get it.
It is. It's pretty good. Basically, here's the quick version for anyone who wants to get the joke. He's a guy who's like, he's not actually even a sports psychologist. Even he has to mention this because he probably gets sued otherwise. But he's a sports psychology trainer, which means he has learned parts of sports psychology. And what he did was, in the early days of that being a thing in League of Legends, where teams had money to pay for this, he just like basically worked with like almost every team in the NALCS, so that then the genius move was he could just say, like, if he just listed the successes, because obviously some of them have to succeed if you worked with like almost everyone, then he just listed only the successes, like, yeah, I did lots. So this team got there, this team got there. You're like, what about the other 5 teams? He's like, but this team got there, and then this team. I was like, well, yeah, you win, mate. You win this one. So, right, Launders. It's been a while since we've seen you in many senses, but you're back now. You're back on the analysis train. Shit's going off. So I want to ask you this question right now, because on this show, many times in the past, and on a lot of your content, you have been a huge defender of Stewie 2K. Mm-hmm. You think this guy's a great player. Like, you think a lot of his decisions inside the game are correct. Let me ask you this question. What have you thought of Stewie 2K in MIBR?
It's been a little bit weird. I think, to be a proper non-bandwagoner, I have to stick with him through thick and thin. And I definitely
but I mean, as someone who knows his game like pretty in depth, I wondered, like, like, why do you see it? Because obviously, in all the interviews, I see everyone's going every which way. Some people say he has. I've heard Fallen say he has freedom. In other interviews, they say, I have to play a different role. Like, what do you think of what's been going on in that sense? Like, do you have a sense of what he's been trying to do?
I think, when Cloud9 won the major, he was taking on some support roles with Cloud9. I think he was actually quite a mature player for someone who should probably have had like a really big ego. And he definitely does think he's good, but he also has like a very different play style, which is like fairly aggressive. And that's definitely like been hard for the team to deal with. I mean, even with Phelps on the team, Phelps is a very smart player. Being very aggressive was something that was hard for SK to find a balance with. And Taco isn't very aggressive, even though, he'll play small sites just like Stewie will. They'll play like Enter on Train, B-side on Dust 2, stuff like that. Stewie will play them differently. So I think that a lot of the times still maybe MIBR are on different pages with him. But I think the thing is that I feel like with Stewie, I constantly believe in him because I see a kid who really wants to win more than anything else. And I felt like when he moved to MIBR, that above any of the other problems, he moved to a team with players who were so set on winning that they could figure it out if they had to. And since then they have had a roster change with Bolts, and that made it a little bit more shaky. But I personally think they have the best roster now possible. I really felt like Bolts has been a weird player for them ever since he moved up from Immortals, because on Immortals he was trying to use a baseball analogy, pitching something. He's doing really well, but then when he moved on to SK, he started just playing really badly, and it seemed like he lacked a lot of confidence and stuff. And then I think that in combination with Stewie just coming on made it seem like Stewie was the main issue, but I'm not sure Stewie was the main issue. I think it's just maybe a little bit of time with this roster with Tarek, and we'll hopefully see the team be really good, because a lot of people with good opinions are very confused at the MIB roster. Like, is it the communication? Is it the roles? Is it Stewie's actually not as good as people thought? I really don't think it's not. I really don't think Stewie is like overrated. I think he is really smart, but it might be a playstyle issue, and it might have been also a combination of both being on the team, as well as the fact that, Coldzera is taking English lessons and they're all trying to learn how to speak English more fluently and whatever.
Sure. What do you think, Moses?
My kind of opinion on this one is I hope, just as a kind of, I guess, a sidebar that leads into my point, I hope that, that Fallen interview that you just referenced, where he kind of said they have their freedom, that was like kind of like the headline and the quote that HLTV put in it. I hope people actually clicked on that and read his statement, because like the two kind of opinions of them being forced into play a certain way and having the freedom to choose what they want, they don't like, they're both true. And in Fallen, it kind of explains that. And he just, it is that thing where they join this team. Obviously, when you come in, you feel like you have to fill a certain slot of the player that you're replacing, fill a certain style that they're looking for, that they're used to. And then as time goes on, you gradually kind of break out of that. And I think that's the big thing. I mean, if you look at the MIBR team, when they were SK, when they were Luminosity, they had players that defied the conventional way to play the game. And that's what made them so unique. And that's what made them so difficult. You had Fallen doing things with an op that no one else was doing. You had the aggression of Fur that very few others were doing. And then you have one of the best players of all time, playing passively, clutching, and playing the late rounds in Coldzera. So now you bring these guys in, and you have to figure out how you're going to work, how aggressive you're going to be, where you're going to be aggressive, when you're going to be aggressive, especially if Tarek and Stewie want to do it. So I haven't really cared about anything that MIBR has done. It's been disappointing, but I always put the barometer for them is the major, right? Like that's kind of the goal that I set for them, where it's like, if they get to the major and it still looks this confused and it still looks this uncoordinated, then we can start talking about real problems that they're having in the roles. But I'm putting a lot of faith in all these guys to be able to figure it out, and it's just not going to be easy. I think people are overreacting about Stewie individually, just because in my head, he's not a high volume numbers guy. And I think he has that kind of a reputation from obviously being, the face of Cloud9 for so long. He was like the most closely associated brand as a player with that organization or with that team when he was in the roster. He was kind of like the go-to guy. If you wanted an interview for Cloud9, you're going to get Stewie. So I think people kind of associate that role with some kind of a star player, and Stewie is, but he's not like the high volume. He's the impact player. He's the guy who's going to get his 15 to 20 kills, and they're going to be solid entries. They're going to be a double kill to open up a bomb site late in the round. It might be a clutch here or there, but he's not going to be racking up like 28, 30 kills or encroaching on 30 every single map. And I think people look at his stats and say, this is a bit worrying. And for me, it's just kind of like they're just kind of where they're supposed to be. They just need to get better for the major, and then everyone forgets about these issues.
Yeah, that's the thing, actually. I think from both angles, like bringing Stewie in, and what you should probably do, if it makes the most sense, is, despite what you were saying, Launders, about what he might have been doing in Cloud9, and this is, by the way, a big issue a lot of teams have, is say you're Stewie 2K and you join MIBR. No matter the fact that you're the one who's won the major, and in theory they need a player, all these factors in theory would give you the leverage. But we just know that's not the way like psychology works. You think to yourself, fuck, I'm joining MIBR. Like, they're the ones that have won everything. I haven't won that much. This is my chance to win. Odds are you're going to try and fit yourself to them. You're just going to do it. So, for example, even if you might ideally be suited to play a very aggressive role or be like one of the star, you're probably going to say to them, I can do what you need. I can fill this role here. I can do this spot on this map. It's just naturally the way young players are going to be. So sometimes the young player himself can set himself up to be in the wrong spot,
By the way, think of it.
But that's not what's happened though. That's not what's happened though. And then maybe that's an issue of the leadership, where he came on the team and they said, hey, we don't want you to feel uncomfortable. And they gave him a long leash, and maybe they should have reined him in a little bit earlier on, because it feels like he is still, in a lot of ways, playing just like he would on Cloud9. And I don't know, Moses, is that something that Fallon talked about in that article?
No, it didn't mention anything specific about Cloud9. It was just, everyone, it's just the kind of, Fallen's very good in interviews, isn't he? He doesn't really give up a whole lot, but he seems to say a very, very lot. He seems to give you these in-depth answers, and they're not really at surface level. I mean, essentially what he's saying is everyone's got the freedom to do what they want, and we still haven't figured out the answer, right? I mean, that's basically what the interview kind of says. And I mean, obviously there's a little bit more to it than that, but I think they are kind of in that phase still where they want to figure out what roles people are going to have. But until then, everyone gets a lot of freedom and input for ideas or input on how to play, and they just haven't found a consistently successful formula. Do they want to stay the loose playing style that they kind of had in later stages of SK, that Tarek and Stewie obviously came from? Do they want to go back to the more strategic approach, which I doubt they do, from the beginning of Luminosity into the early stages of SK? And those are just conversations that they need to figure out. And obviously, Yanko coming in is gonna be able to help with that a lot, and I'm sure he'll have some input on where they go from there. I think they're going to stick around for a looser play style. And honestly, if I had my dream, you can't exactly say that Stewie would be able to slot into this like in a mirror image, but I would want him to take up the kind of position that Taco did. Why don't him and Cold work together to open up a bomb site? Stewie's phenomenal on entries. He's phenomenal on going first and finding a kill, creating some kind of havoc. He's going to be way more aggressive with it than Taco was. He'll be way more impactful in terms of actually attacking a bomb site early on in rounds and forcing a utility. And you've got Cold Zera there to back him up. Those two, in my mind, should just like fucking hold hands every single round for the first 30 seconds and just, they use their utility to take over a part of the map. That is a pretty dangerous pairing to be able to like go into like box halls on train, for instance, and just clear it out. Or, on Mirage, take over mid together coming from underpass, whatever it might be. If those two can work out systems for the different parts of the maps, I think that could be so deadly.
Because one of the things is when they signed those players, especially now it's one thing when they just signed Stewie 2K, because obviously it was obvious when it went bad that they'd do another roster move, but that could have changed the whole complexion of the team. When they signed Tarek, though, that's what it's so confusing to me about before they got Yanko as the coach. Is like, if you sign Tarek as well, you are surely committing and telegraphing to the whole scene, we have to play like an up-tempo, fairly loose, like fragging-based style, basically. Like, basically, we have to be like FaZe Clan. That's what we're going for at this point in time, because that's what these players play out. They're the best, They're not going to work if they're supportive elements. And if they're not the supportive elements, is Fur going to be the supportive element? Is Fallen going to be? Like, it doesn't really make sense in that sense. I feel like you've got to go that way. It's everything, all directions pointing that way.
Here's my kind of problem at the moment is it's not even with SK. It's not even about the roles or anything like that. It's when Cold Zera like has that. I don't know if he actually said it or when like the roster, the rumor came out that he was offered and looking at Team Liquid and he was unsatisfied with how hard they were working or how much they were practicing. This Brazilian core, the conversation with them for 2 years was that they're a family that lives together and breathes Counter-Strike. And, they said it in interviews, we worked harder than everyone else. We lived slept on mattresses on the floor and woke up and played Counter-Strike and thought about it. Why don't we hear any of those stories anymore? Why don't we get that kind of idea? Why aren't these players telling us at this point that they're working that hard?
Something.
Not that you have to broadcast it, but we would hear something, wouldn't you?
No, but that's actually something I have heard from a number of Brazilian pros, is that's been a typical problem in the Brazilian scene, actually, is that when people are on the way up and they're nothing and they've got no money and they've never had any success, they grind super fucking hard. But the problem is, it's like a young pop star or something. The second they get the success, that's when they either get the big ego, which makes them hard in a team, or they just start getting lax in their playing style. They don't improve mistakes because they think I've made it, Now, it's obviously a common problem generally, but it sounds like it's a big problem in the Brazilian scene because what it was explained to me is because so many of them come from legit poverty. For them, even just to be playing at tier 1 and going to every event and having a big salary, that alone is success. For some of them, It's not about having to win majors, just having that's pretty sick to them.
I had more faith in the Brazilian lineup just because, of how far they climbed up and then also being able to do 2 majors in a row, but they're more than gods in Brazil, and that's something that a lot of players can't say. Fallen's probably the most popular player in the entire planet just because of how big the fan base is in Brazil and how few players there are for them to look up to. But one thing I thought was interesting was the interview that Rush gave at E-League where he...
By the way, if they're gods in Brazil, can we just join these two memes together? Because in that case, Fallen has to be like those people who... I can't remember where they live now. Those people in Game of Thrones. Because you remember, they're like ones who are the fucking faceless men. They worship like the many-faced god.
Oh, yeah,
just put it together there. This Fallen... God, Two-Faced, Toledo. Launders doesn't get it. Sorry, he's been out of Counter-Strike for a while. Keep going on. Bring it back. Bring it back.
I stopped watching after Red Wedding, and then I came back and I forgot everyone's name, so I gave up. So So like Rush kind of like subtweeted Stewie a little bit, where he didn't specifically call him out, but he said, Stewie was, or it's hard when you get to the top and you realize there's nowhere else to go, but you've got to hold down, you've got to like buckle down, practice just as much, just to retain that much, right? Just to retain the major title until the next major, which is 6 months from then. And if you lose a little bit because you're drained, like you have to stick with it. You can't, throw a fit. You have to consistently grind and realize your teammates are going through the exact same thing. And maybe that was a kind of a subtweet type criticism he had of Stewie, who seemed to be unhappy, and that's why he moved on. And I always thought that was interesting, but I expected more from SK, who held it together for 2 majors.
One thing, I actually wanted to get your take on this, Moses, actually, because when I did my video on Janko becoming the coach, I was thinking to myself beforehand, right, bearing in mind he's never been a coach in terms of like actual pro Counter-Strike, and obviously this is a lineup where it's one of the hardest for anyone to predict how it's going to go. Could go amazing, could go shit, no one knows. I thought there's not really going to be that much you can say. So a unique angle I took in the video was I thought to myself, right, well, the one unique angle I can give that anyone who's just a journalist doing something won't have is I've been in green rooms for hundreds of hours with Janko, watching games with him, hearing him talk about the game, hearing how he thinks about, what decisions he makes. And so what I tried to do in the video was speculate what I think his kind of like idealized version of the game is, and therefore with MIBR, what he would do. And basically I decided I thought he would actually do a fairly loose, like low econ 4-spy style, something like FaZe Clan basically. And one of the reasons I explained this is because every time I've ever been in a scenario with Janko watching a game, with the exception of, say, like G2, who famously were terrible at 4-spies, and everyone would be like, right, that doesn't make any sense. A lot of the time when teams would do 4-spies, because I prefer like a bit more like the Astralis, like a little bit more conservative, I would always be like, I don't know if they should do this, actually, it's a bit dodgy. Janko would be the guy where he'd always be like, no, it's fine. And his logic would always go like this. Like, one, he would only do it when it's teams that had really good aimers, so you have a chance to win the round. 2, his logic was always more like, if you play it out correctly, then it'll be fine. Like, he wasn't thinking like of the downside of it. He was thinking, right, if it works. And so as a result, his logic would always be, it's fine, because if they play it out correctly, then like, they break the opponent's money here, and then the whole game turns, Whereas my approach instead was like, well, what if it doesn't work out, and then what if we actually have good gun rounds, therefore let's like save 2 and then we'll just win out the rest of it. It's a very different philosophy. Well, if he really is like gonna have that kind of a mentality as a coach, I think that could fit this lineup of players. I think they've got the right personnel to do that. But the problem is, I wanted to get this point earlier actually, that's why I feel like the pickups before they had a coach weren't very good for MIBR. Because what I thought, if I had to name their number one strength as a team with their different cores for the last 2 years, it was that they played the slow-paced style to make the opponent make the mistake. And then when you make the mistake, like every time they were in a 2v2, you knew if you fucked up and didn't comm properly or you didn't check an angle, they were going to get the drop on you, they're going to get a comm on you, and that's where they'd win the round. They didn't just win the round by shooting you in the head, Like, they had amazing players, but that's what they had over, like, everyone in the scene. I think the only team that could match them in it was probably Astralis, actually, which is why they had amazing matches. So you look now, they haven't had that strength at any time with this half-American lineup.
Well, the problem with that, I think there's 2 things. One, I think you have to adjust the North American players to that style of play and that style of thinking and that style of teamwork, because famously North American players have to rise and wade through dog shit to get to the top tiers of professional Counter-Strike. So they don't learn all those things that the Brazilian players have been doing for years. And then 2, who always gets SK those advantages that allow them to slow down the tempo and let other teams make the mistake? It's Fur being aggressive, or it's Fall and finding a pick with the AWP. Those are 2 of the players who have dropped off the most since in the past 6 months. And I think those are going to be Janko's goals early on, and especially, if you're just going to, what he steps in, and I think he does Zotac with them, and then he does Stockholm, and then he has the major. So I think those first 2 events, Stockholm and Zotac, it's going to be focusing on finding ways to get Fallen and Fur back into some kind of a groove. I think it's going to be finding ways to get them to kind of get turned back on as players, to provide some of those openings and provide some of those strong starts. And then also I think he's going to just preach some fundamentals, because if you'll notice, if you go look at some of their games from E-League and from some of these tournaments when they've added Stewie, they've done a terrible job of winning man advantage situations, which they were one of the best teams in the world for 2 years. They play 4v3s terribly now. They don't have that same kind of communication in the mid round, and I think that's what he's going to have to preach. And those would be maybe it's letting through some of my own thoughts. Where if I was going to step in as the MIBR coach, that's what I'd do. I would start doing coordinated aggression with Fur instead of sending him on his own. I would send him with a little bit more of a chain that he can't like flank across the whole map, but you put a buddy with him and you let him play buddy system and be aggressive where he wants. And then I also find ways to tell them we need to slow down these mid rounds and make better communications and better calls and stop fucking up 4v3s and stop failing at post plants, whatever it might be. Those are some of their biggest strengths that they had. You rarely saw them lose, an even retake or an even bomb site hold after the bomb was planted, and now they're losing them left and right. So, I mean, there's some simple things you can fix that I think immediately would make MIBR better, but certainly the mountain that he's got to climb is getting Fallen and Fur back online without sacrificing Tarek and Stewie.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most interesting stats for them, is that with their with the best SK lineup, they had one of the highest conversion stats for rounds where they were up a man, where they knew the perfect adjustment, and every other team pretty much looked up to them. And something now that's really interesting is they were winning an outrageous number of their pistols, and still they have like some of the worst conversions for rounds where they have the mid round or they're down a man or where they're up a man, just like Moses is saying.
It's weird how it's happened. I don't know how you kind of drop the ball on that, because it should be, I mean, it's never easy at the pro level, but it should be one of the easier scenarios, especially for a team that was so good at it for so long. But they've really had some kind of, I mean, maybe this lends itself to, as they said, the communication, transition into English, not quite being everything that they want it to be quite yet. They're going to get better at that, though, by the way. I don't like using that as a red flag. I don't like doing it during broadcasts, because while it's an interesting point for maybe the first couple of weeks, we know from talking to these guys behind the scenes, like, all of them speak fine English, like conversationally. When you have a drink at a bar, obviously the alcohol is going to make them be a little bit more confident. Or like when you just talk to them after a match in the studio or in the arena, without the alcohol. I mean, they all speak fine English, and you can carry on hour-long conversations with any of them. But it is that nitty-gritty of the details of a Counter-Strike match that might throw them off of that split-second call, having to translate it. And I think that's going to come with time. It's not like you have to teach someone who can barely speak English how to make these split-second calls in English. So I think that they've got to be on the verge of getting over the translation thing. If
you want to see the difference, the good analogy I would give is, if you've ever seen Cold Zero do an interview in English, so he's on camera and he knows people are watching, or you've seen him do one of those like Betway videos,
Yeah.
Like, yes, his English seems very limited in those videos, but that's because he's under pressure. He's on camera. He's having to think stuff up. So in a game, I could imagine, it's very limited. As you're saying, if you talk to him in private, his English sounds perfectly fine. You'd never know he had any issues with it. All that.
Same with
Fur.
Fur.
He learned it a few years ago. Yeah.
Fur doesn't even do interviews, and his English is great.
His accent's gotten pretty good now as well, actually. He hasn't even got that like mad accent he used to have. And he's not telling people he's going to put bullets in him anymore. So that helps.
It is just confidence. Like, I did an interview with Fur at Katowice, and completely in English. Like, that was 2 years ago.
Your English is fucking great now, mate. It's an old joke, but whatever. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, he was good. It's probably just confidence. And that is an interesting thing, where I think when someone's nervous and something like they die and they need to make a call right away, even if English is their native language, they could fuck it up, right? They could call something else by accident. So you can only imagine it's hard to translate.
I'll give you a little classic story about that, by the way, is that a long, long time ago, we're talking literally like 14 years ago or something, the legendary Norwegian player Element actually ended up playing for MIBR for one tournament, because this was at a point of time where he was just going from team to team, like he was still a very good player.
Cash for that paycheck.
He'd kind of outstayed his welcome a bit on some other squads, and when he went to MIBR, they told him, like, you got to learn Portuguese, you got to do all this, and because he's a very smart guy, they trusted he would, but he never put in any effort whatsoever, right? So at his first tournament, his team did all right, they were like in the match, I think it was the match to finish like top 3, so they ended up finishing 4th, and they lost the game on DOS 2, because when he was in the B site, I think he was like, holding the bomb or something in B when he planted, and the CT was coming in through the window. And so they said in Portuguese, like Porto or something, which I think means window. And he thought they meant door, because he didn't know what that word was. So he just looked at exactly the wrong spot and died as a result of it and lost the 1v1. So like, obviously that's not going to happen very often, but you can see the sort of shit that could happen. And the problem with that as well is, even if your teammates are like, it's okay, you're still learning, that's going to trigger the fuck out of you because you actually commed perfectly for the guy, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other hand, Moses' brother went into a German team and actually had flashcards and at least learned some of the spots. So all I'm saying, Element, is maybe do your fucking homework, man.
He did his best.
Yeah.
They were drinking a lot of sake at that event. I don't think much of it took.
Okay. What about this then, Launders? You are also a huge Fallen fan. Like, here's the thing. Unlike me, I see through a lot of it. You know, I admire a lot about him. And I always respect greatness, by the way, and people who accomplish a lot. But I think I see through a lot of the mystique, you know, and I still like it, by the way. I like that WWE shit, you know, a bit of the over-the-top stuff. But I feel like the mystique, it gets to you. You like it. You actually do look up to this guy. You think he's a fucking great man, etc. So here's my question for you. How do you resolve that with the fact he's been pretty fucking bad this year? Like, what do you think's gone on with him personally, or as a player, this is?
It'd be all speculation, obviously, but I do think that
most of the show's
it is
going to be speculation for anyone watching now.
Fair enough. Yeah. What I do think is interesting, though, to that point, is that there's so much success that can be attributed to one player getting a lot better on a couple of other teams. So examples being Glaive on Astralis, Magis comes into the lineup, Glaive actually becomes a whole lot better, and they're much better overall because of it. You know, from 70 to 90 ADR is a huge difference for 1/5 of your team. And then you have Navi, where Electronic, while was a great player before Navi, at the beginning wasn't as hot as he has been recently. And that's been a huge contributing factor to how good Navi is. And then on the flip side, you have SK, who for some reason, and this is kind of curious, have taken on 2 new players. And instead of Fallen becoming more motivated, you know, to prove that this lineup is the best lineup and we can still do it, he's gotten worse, and Fur as well, and those are very strange. So I don't know, you know, I really don't know if it's something that has to do with him in his personal life. Maybe it's the thought of having to climb all the way back. Maybe it's resting on the laurels of your 2 majors and not needing to win anymore. I really don't know, but I can only assume it is a mentality thing, because you could take a break from CS, but the game, I think, has changed a lot less in the last year than it did from year 1 to 3. 1 to 3 was crazy in terms of the meta of maps, and a lot of the maps now are just the maps that have been out for over a year and a half, and people have gotten very good at them, and there's nuanced stuff that's changed. But even through that, they've been playing. So I really don't think that, even if you, there's no reason that a great player from last year can't be a great player right now, I don't think.
Okay.
So I can explain Glaive getting better when Magis joins it. It's mostly because, obviously, keeping the majority of the core, they had those 4 players. So Magic's only replacing 1 versus Tarek and Stewie coming in, they're replacing 2. But Astralis strikes me as that team, and not even necessarily strikes. I mean, I kind of know it, but they're like just that team that puts a lot of work into like the theory side of things, and like their practice does not just consist of hopping in a server and scrimming teams, right? Like they're going to sit down, they're going to watch, you know, a film or watch a demo, whatever you want to call it. They're going to talk things over, how to respond in certain situations. And as an in-game leader, that is the most valuable practice he can get, is when he starts to feel so comfortable that his team knows what everyone's doing, that he doesn't have to micromanage, that he can focus individually on his own game. And they're probably the only team in the world that can fully do that, where Glaive doesn't feel like he has to micromanage. And I think everyone kind of has a great understanding of how that's going to work. So Glaive just gets to be another player. He gets to make a call if needed, but once you get into the mid rounds, a lot of players are going to make a call based off what they see. So Glaive just gets to chill there. No one's looking to him every single time to have the answer. I think when you go over to Fallen, and again, this will be speculation, if I had to assume, I would imagine he's putting a little bit of emphasis on branding, a little bit of emphasis on building his companies that he has down in Brazil, a little bit of emphasis on things that aren't involved directly to competing in Counter-Strike. And this is, again, pure speculation. Let's not freak out. But I mean, I would imagine it has something to do with like his Fallen brand of hardware and building up that kind of empire down in Brazil, setting himself up for after he wants to retire. And I can't blame him. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. You have to kind of have a plan for later on and what you're going to transition into. But I would imagine that's going to take away and take a toll on your own individual, and as the leader figure of the team, it's going to take away from what that team is able to practice and improve upon. And then you want to go over to Fur. Famously, he's been one of the pros over the past years who just played the least Counter-Strike of anyone. He's even said he doesn't like to play Counter-Strike outside of officials and outside of practice. So it's like, you can explain his little drop down, and obviously he's going to have to step it up in that department if he wants to get back. So there's a couple of things in there that you could probably point to.
You think he's in the second half of his career? I think that's what Charles Barkley said about. I think Charles Barkley said that about LeBron recently, that he's kind of doing this more philanthropic stuff. Yeah,
LeBron is definitely in the second half of his career. Not that he's crazy, but remember he was like one of the last guys I think to come out of high school. He's put so many fucking miles on his body. Yeah. But yeah, I would imagine Fallen is probably going to be at the twilight. I guess this would be like entering the twilight phase of the last few years. I in my opinion, especially if things don't turn around. I don't know that for sure. Haven't had any conversations with him about it, but I think someone like him who can be set for future once he stops competing to be able to go home and relax and stay with his girlfriend and stay at home and have this branded empire and have the reputation that he has. I think he's going to be fun.
An angle you brought up there that I actually think is interesting in terms of the coaching angle is, if you remember, because Cologne was the tournament where it was like Zeus's last tournament from what I remember. They won the major, then Zeus left, and then they continued on, and they still had a lot of success. So actually initially people didn't even attribute any issues to Zeus leaving. But famously, if you remember, when they came into Cologne was where they'd said in an interview beforehand that they were doing twice as much theory as they did practice when they were in their boot camp. Yep. And at the time that was like an insane comment, because listen, other people watch demos, but listen, no one's fucking doing twice as much theory as scrim time, just because. But in normal teams, you would never be able to get the players to sit down for that. I don't think you can get Forrest to sit down for 5 hours and watch you do something on a fucking whiteboard. It's just not the sort of player he is. He's not going to do that. So I do wonder, after Zeus left and they just were on their own, left to their own devices, especially when you consider the next year, because Fur's level in terms of in-game performance went way up again. They were based a lot more the next year on individual players, they weren't necessarily. Yeah. So I wonder how much of that they ever did again, whether they just abandoned the theory stuff. Because since they still won, I could even see a world in which you'd think it's more we've kind of got the formula down for that. It's like Coca-Cola, we're not just going to keep changing shit. Yeah, so this will keep working. And obviously it did, by the way, for a fucking long time. So they weren't wrong. But when you have totally new players, because obviously even Bolts was a new player to the team, Stewie is, Tarek is. When you have new players, when things that you were doing before don't work, that's where, if anything, you want someone to come in and rework everything from the theory angle. It's not even just about what role do you play, etc. You want to go from the bottom up again, I think.
One giant red flag was when Fallen, stopped calling on half the maps. That was so weird. And, it just says a lot about where they were mentally. It just showed that there was a ton of frustration, because to give up such a big role that you were so good at for so long is just first of all, a point of pride. And then it's a weird thing where you are setting a precedent with your teammates who now look at you in a weird way. You're wait, no, what's going on here?
My theory for that, by the way, again, this is pure speculation, by the way. I definitely haven't asked them about this, but this is one of those ones where I generally think I have a decent track record of being able to figure out, based on how someone said it and then what the outcome was, who was probably the instigator. If I had to guess, especially now that we know that Cold Zero had an offer from FaZe, Cold Zero even himself implied he might go to Team Liquid, which, by the way, I think itself is a power play. It's sort of saying, I'm going to need things different, or I might be leaving. I think if he wants to go to Team Liquid, he goes to Team Liquid. So my theory
there's a 0% chance he leaves that team.
Oh, for sure. But you see what I mean?
Yeah.
On that one. It's a clever power play. It's like what they do in the NBA, if you've got
there's a 0% chance that he leaves MIBR?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I guarantee you that Noah locked that contract up so tight.
If anything, I think it's Fallen that ends up having to leave before Cold Zero, because you're going to build around Cold Zero, especially if he's the one that's the most motivated. But anyway, here was the theory, Launders. When I heard that move, the Cold Zero is going to be calling now. I initially thought, like you did, maybe Fallen's just lost faith in himself. He's just given up. He thinks he needs a break. But this is the part where I immediately decided that sounds like bullshit. Is when I noticed that they weren't actually giving up the in-game leader role. Is that Fallen still called on 2 maps, and Cold Zero called on 2 or 3 maps, and then obviously they don't play all the maps anyway. They always put Permaban 1. Right? When I heard that just screams to me that Cold Zero was right, well, things are going badly in the team right now, but my game's fucking fine. So you know what? I want to be the in-game leader. So I want to do that. Actually, you know what? I just want to call these maps though. So it's like it's the star player prerogative, because why would you do? That's the thing that never made sense about it. If it was Fallen doing it, it's like if you're an in-game leader, you're going to be all in or you're going to be all out. Like you're going to be like, either I'm the in-game leader, let me call everything, or you know what, maybe it is time for me to give it up. Okay, Cold Zero, take it, fully embrace it. You become a great in-game leader. I think as an in-game leader, that isn't a great move, and that's just like you just have to make a concession because this dude's the best in your team, and your team's pretty bad at the time. So if you have to do what you're going to do to keep him there, I feel like it wasn't even. It wasn't good in game, but maybe it kept them together. Who the fuck knows?
But is he in a position where he's like trying to collect the severance by not quitting because he's like? It seems like he's not washing the dishes as well as he could be. You know what I mean? Where Cold Zero's performance has also become a lot worse, and you could attribute it to maybe the fact that he's calling. But I definitely agree that there's probably a huge. He had a lot of say in whether or not he was going to call.
Cold Zero's game isn't the same as like when we see Nico and Simple like carry teams like individually for a stretch. Cold Zero can't. I don't think Cold Zero can do that. I think Cold Zero's his game is predicated a lot more on teamwork, on what his teammates are doing, who he's working with, the knowledge of the map and everything like that, and like where people are on the map. I don't think he's going to be a simpler Nico that can just run around the Deagle, get you 3 kills, and round after round after round, and get 40 kills when his next closest teammate has 15. So in that sense, I think most of the hit on Cold Zero's game this year has been a decline in guys like Fallen and Fur. I think it's all connected in some kind of a way. So I honestly I think it's the weirdest thing with MIBR because they do look awful at times, but I feel like it's going to be a very quick rise for them to get back to it if they ever do. I think it's going to be like flipping a switch. I don't think it's going to be like this progressive. They're going to get top 4s. They're going to get top 4s. I think suddenly something's going to click and something's going to get figured out, and I think they're going to be back to doing very, very well. And like I said, I think the priority is Fur and Fallen.
Because that's actually something, by the way, where I've noticed a lot of fans disagree with the narrative, right? That Taco leaving had any impact on Cold Zero. And the reason seems to be because, listen, a lot of fans, in fact, a lot of young people just make this classic mistake, which is whenever there's a problem, they think, right, there's a problem, therefore I have to find what the solution is. And first of all, that mentality doesn't work when you're talking about things like a team of 5 people or a fucking playing style or, like one side of a map. It's nearly never going to be one person or one type of thing that's fucking it up for you. It's probably a bunch of them. And what you might have to do is maybe fixing one makes one a little less worse, and eventually like these are the sorts of ways that, like, as you're saying, actually, you can go from being like, 6th best to 1st. You don't just go 6th to 5th to 4th. So I actually think, by the way, from watching his play, I do think that losing Taco did hurt Cold Zero's game from when I've watched it. It's just the difference is he still did have tournaments where he had mad stats. But when I went and watched those performances, they weren't like the old Cold Zero mad stats. Because the thing that used to make Cold Zero's stats ridiculous is that it's like that. It's too bad they coined that fucking meme before he became a top player. That's the stupid Olafmeister Guardian meme. You never noticed the Olafmeister kill, but I remember the Guardian flick. The famous Reddit.
Yeah.
Right? That actually applies way more to Cold Zero when he was at his peak. Because the thing about the Cold Zero style game was, so many times he wouldn't have necessarily gotten like 4 massive big rounds that'd be highlights on HLTV.org, but he'd have 30 kills and you'd be like, what the fuck, where did they come from? And the whole thing was, it was like they were just coming to him so easily, in part because his team setup was amazing, the comms were amazing, Taco absolutely was like his fucking butler, just serving shit up. Now, yeah, he had the skill or maybe just better to say the technical mastery of the game to be able to get those kills. A lot of players wouldn't, even if you put them in that spot. But in the games I've seen since Taco's been gone, I feel like the games where he has the monster performances, it is where he frags out. It is where he wins like 3 1v3s or something,
Yeah, but that like is like a perfect description in a way of why these roster changes, not that they changed the roster, just the selection of players is so head scratching because it's it's not that he needed Taco perfectly as Taco, like, right? He just needed someone who was going to be like his buddy and help him take over parts of the map.
Mentality, isn't it?
Yeah. But like everyone grows out of those, you grow out of that eventually, right? Like this is why it's so confusing that they brought in 2 star players, because neither Tarek or Stewie, they're too used to being like the go-to guy for Cloud9 to come in and be like, yeah, I'll be Coldzera's bitch for a year. Like I'm fine with doing that. Taco comes into the team, start of his career. He's all of a sudden launched from obscurity in Brazil to the world stage in luminosity. And of course he's going to be fine taking those kinds of roles and being that guy who sets Coldzera up. And even Taco, after a couple of years, he's like, you know what? I'm actually way better than I'm showing, and I'm tired of being the guy who's taking all this criticism. I'm tired of being the guy who's only known for helping Coldzera. You know, he goes to Team Liquid where he's going to get a little bit more. His number's going to be called way more. He's going to get a little bit more of a chance to show off his style. Even Coldzera's grown out of the shell that he's had for the past 2 years. If he's the one going to fall and saying, I want to call on 2 maps, that's Coldzera kind of growing into that next level and saying, like, you know what, I'm ready for this next amount of responsibility. Players are going to progress the longer they're in these teams, and you have to be able to shift and adapt the team around that. And obviously, you can't just expect someone to come in and say, listen, listen, Stewie, we know you were the in-game leader. We know you're the impact player, the entry fragger, and, the star player, generally all-around guy for Cloud9, the secondary op. We're going to want you to just kind of stick with Coldzera. He's going to throw utility. You're going to go die, and you're going to set him up for 2 kills. It doesn't work like that, and that's why those pickups are so head-scratching to a lot of people, is the entire situation around that is just kind of confused.
I don't know. I don't think I think he is like quite aggressive, but I really think that he was maybe more mature, just prepared to take on a role like that than some of his teammates on Cloud9. And I'm sure that with the amount of time, and you've seen like how much they look up to and talk to Coldzera at events, all the Cloud9 players, like constantly like mining him for information, honestly. And the fact that they looked up to the SK so much, I don't think that. I think it's like once they're in the server, it's just kind of hard to understand what Stewie is going to do as an opponent, and maybe also as his teammate. And I think that's where some of the trouble lies. But I really don't think it's him not wanting to do what he's told or expected to do.
Do you have another topic, Moses?
No, not really.
Okay, then what about this then? So launders, since we haven't had you on for a while, and it's the off season, there's been a bunch of tournaments recently. Pick a team that you'd like to talk about. Is there a top team out there that's interesting? Or has some interesting elements to it? It's your choice for this one.
We need like a Wheel of Fortune, Duncan. We need to start bringing some elements into this shit.
All right, I got one. Mouse sports.
That would actually be a sick idea, by the way, Moses. There should be a Wheel of Fortune type thing. And what you do is, someone says like go, and that like starts the wheel. So it'd be like that. And each one's like, player move, like speculation.
Everyone
drama.
picks 2 topics. Community picks 3 topics. You throw them on the wheel. You fucking wheel it and count.
Yeah, that's
Listen,
good.
Some sponsor hit me up. We'll make it happen. Right. Anyway, what are you saying, Launders?
Mouse sports are an interesting one. I think we have a team where you have taken out a player that was, I think, there's probably some comparison with Stiko and Taco in the thought of how they're maybe not individually that strong, but I think it's weird because it's actually comes so much down to mechanics and not decision making. A lot of times, I think Taco is probably better decision making than Stiko was, just a higher tier of player in my opinion. But aim wise, they're kind of on the same thing where they have some bad whips sometimes. They take him out, who was definitely a role player like Taco was. They bring Snacks in. It's a very confusing move just because everyone knows that Snacks can be good, but he hasn't been good recently. He's nothing like Stiko, and Mousesports are already a really good team. But you watch their games at E-League, and honestly, there was an argument for them potentially beating Astralis in that series. Like some of those rounds were unbelievably close. I actually thought they would take Mirage for sure. And Astralis just came clutch with some of their individual efforts, but I feel like Snacks has fit into the lineup a lot better than I would have expected.
I'm not a fan personally, but
I'm not either.
No?
Here's the thing, by the way. One thing I'll say, Launders, like up front, again, to tie into the point I made earlier, it doesn't have to be like one factor only. So, for example, I think both those players also share another quality, which is that towards the end of their time in their teams, Taco and Stiko, they were both also playing worse than they had in the past. So the problem with that is, part of you thinks, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to remove the player that's playing badly. But the problem is, like we were saying before, what happens with what his role was or what his mentality was and what he brought to the team in that sense. So that's my issue I see with the Snacks move is like I just don't see it as Snacks' role to do that. I don't even really see what the point for Snacks is to do that. Like, I feel like if I was him, I just said, if I don't want to be a Virtus Pro anymore, fuck it. I'll go to AGO and I'll try and be the star player of that team. We'll take this team to the top level. You know, I don't really even see why he would want to fit into Sticko's kind of a role. And quite frankly, I thought, like, I agree, because their team generally had a little bit of a downward slide. So I also can agree I can also understand why they did like a drastic move, you know, tried to get back to the top. At this tournament, they did look better. Obviously, looked terrible at Cologne. They did look better at E-League, but even then, like, some aspects of their team, I think, look worse. Like, for example, Rops has looked way worse since Snacks came alive. Snacks himself hasn't looked particularly good. What's bizarre is he's another example of the impact player. He still has some rounds that look sick, and then you go look at his stat line, and you're like, where are all the kills? You know, it doesn't make sense. It's the opposite from someone like the old Cold Zero example I was giving. So what were you going to say, Moses?
I was just going to say, I mean, Snacks, the tough part to judge Snacks right now is it is kind of unfair, because I still think of him as that like top 5, top 3 player in the world who does crazy shit and carries his team. And we haven't seen that since, I think, like DreamHack Vegas, which is kind of scary. So I don't know how much longer it'll take to kind of shake that image from my mind, but it was clearly he just got to the point where he just wanted the fuck out of Virtus Pro. And I think if you tie in everything, you know, DK's reported a couple times, and just to kind of back that up as well, similar to things I've been hearing in the background at events, is that Mouse Sports, there is some discontent. There is something with their players where there's some players unhappy and there's some players who aren't liking the way that things are going. And I think,
by the way, sounds like another example of like, right, some of us are thinking of leaving. Fuck, let's do a panic roster move.
Yes.
You know, it's like, I mean, I made this analogy, I think, on the last episode, but it's like the thing of like, oh, the relationship's falling apart. Let's have a threesome to save the marriage. It's like, what are the odds that works? Come on, man. That's such a wild, out of control.
Well, it's never going to work if your girlfriend brings in Snacks, is it?
Exactly there. And you're like, what?
She's leaving you 100%.
You're gone. But I mean, as wild as that sounds, like, I've heard those same things that DK is reporting on it. It's mental to think that, you know, Mouse Sports has been to finals. They've been placing in top 4s. They've been playing really, really well. I'll drop this bombshell.
Even took a couple of titles along the way.
Yeah, I think Duncan's going to disagree with me. I don't know about Launders. If I'm replacing anyone on Mouse Sports, like, if you go back to when Stiko's on this roster, right? If I have to replace someone on that roster, I'm replacing Oscar.
Oscar is actually on the low, pretty inconsistent. He is actually, sometimes he's not there.
He is the first person I take out of that team, and I say, we'll move on.
I think, like, yeah, I think he's always kind of flown. He's got so many highlights, and he is very smart. He's like, maybe simple, just not consistent enough or something.
He might be one of the best uppers we have in like open space mid-range, right? Like, if you give him like a minute on the clock and you have him wandering around the map not knowing where anyone is, he might be the best opper we have in the game at that scenario.
Yeah.
But I do know what you mean, Moses. Like, even when the Mouse was at its peak, I always said about Oscar is like, he is one of the most fucking brittle superstars we have, because like normally superstars are like, right, I always get my numbers, I always play my game. If I have a great game, I take over the game. If I don't, like, thinking of the old Cold Zero, like, you can't really stop them, you know, they can only stop themselves. Oscar stopped himself half the time he took over the game, which is why when if Mouse went super deep, he was usually the MVP. But there's also been plenty of games where he had like 9 kills, and it's not that he didn't get ops. You know, he had ops in those games. He was out of the gate, psyched himself out, whatever. I don't know what it is.
It's not even that. Go ahead, Launders. So I was going to mention his demeanor. Like, Yanko brought this up about how Mouse Sports sometimes, whether they're winning or losing, just look like they're not even playing a tournament. They're so chill about every round, regardless of the result. And he felt like it was kind of depressing to watch. And he felt like, how can a team function like this? And Chris, in an interview recently, said that they brought on Snacks because they felt like they needed somebody who they could allow to go off on their own and make plays for the team, because they didn't have anyone like that before. That could have been Oscar, though, or it could have been Oscar. But I don't know why it's not. Oscar does look like, when he's playing, he does look like he's just in like a Groundhog's Day of his like midlife crisis, where like he just wakes up every single down and finds out his house and his car have been repossessed. His wife has left him. It's just over and over, just on some kind of a loop.
Imagine a team where him and MSL were on the same team, the fucking face cams. be the most like at the end it'd have to be like they'd have to be sponsored by like fucking
Botox,
Wellbutrin or some shit, you know, like
Turtle wax.
Fucking hell. But I mean, yeah, I just think Oscar as a player, I think even beyond like his demeanor and his gameplay and everything, I think you look at the fact that more than any other player I think we have, I feel like, you know, I guess I could be, I've never actually looked this up. I feel like he's just like straight up missed events. Like he obviously missed Belo Horizonte. I heard it was something due to the fact that last time he tried to get the shots to go to Brazil, like he had like a bad reaction, didn't want to go through it again. So he missed that event. There was a whole snafu, which is now ages ago, when he first joined Mouse Sports when Nico was still on it, and he was on the team for like a month and then decided to step away. And he seems to have this like one foot in, 1 foot out type thing where like he misses events here or there.
The reason, by the way, why that's more significant as well is because if you've noticed, Mouse is one of the teams that this year has been grinding the hardest. They go to every event.
They also, like after the Belo Horizonte, like they had Nothing In, who played like pretty well in some spots, and then there was a report, I might have been DK reported that they were going to replace they're going to replace. Did they say they were going to replace Oscar or Sticko?
They would replace Sticko.
Okay, I thought they were going to slot him in with Sticko. But
no, but I mean, if you pick up Nothing, right? Like that would make sense to replace Sticko, not Snacks. But like if you're going to get Nothing, you know, like his star days are over being a star player, and he knows that, and he's acknowledged that, and obviously he fit in great as a role player. And by the way, the entire story, I don't know if you saw us do the broadcast throughout that whole event. Probably not. It was on Facebook. I doubt a whole lot of people heard it. But it was
self-deprecating.
It was the fact that Nothing as a personality on that team could help keep them uplifted through like the tough times of a game and help keep the attitude. Because Jordan's one of those people you just can't help but like smile and laugh and have a good time when he's around. Like he's always cracking jokes. And that seems to be the exact time. Like it's the most depressing thing watching Chris J give an interview at an event for like $250,000. And he's just sitting there in this interview and he's like, yeah, sometimes it's weird. I have to remind my players that it's okay to be happy that we're winning, and it's okay to be having fun when we're winning at a game. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, what's it like to play for that team? He's
not getting out of his seat either, right? So it's weird. Like they're so relaxed.
Here's the thing. I actually know most of the Mouse Sports guys, like some of them like personally, definitely from events, etc. And I can tell you that is actually an aspect of their team, which is actually kind of weird, is that in terms of like personality, they don't have very many people who are like vocal or emotional, because like I'll start at the top. We've said Oscar, in theory, the star player, but an incredibly emotional person. Someone, by the way, who has nothing in common with some of his teammates, like the younger teammates. What does he have in common with them? I think he has like a whole family. He's like 28 years old or something. Yeah. He's had a whole life. He's even played CS for like over 10 years. You know, this guy's been around a long time. His whole goals and vision and what he wants to do in his life is very different to like 17-year-old Rop's second year of his career. You know, like that's a night and day. Then if that's his star player and he's not a guy getting fired up, in fact, sometimes psychs himself out, then you go down. So Sonny's been a very good player for them. He's Finnish. Like if you've ever met anyone who's Finnish, the reason why Nato and Lurpis are very unusual is because they're actually very extroverted guys. And by the way, that's all that needs to be said. Lurpis is an extroverted guy for Finns. Like, do you understand that?
He is very extroverted.
No, but people think he's a robot dude. Like, but for Finns, he's extroverted.
He is.
Like they just legit don't. Like I actually once watched a video. It's a series you can go watch online. I can't remember the name of it. Where the concept is they take a young person from each like country around the world. So a woman from Russia, a woman from Finland, one from Germany, and it's called something like, you know, like ethnic beauty or something. And what they ask these women is like, you know, what's your country like? Like, what are the qualities of your people like? What's good about your people? And then they even ask them, you know, like, what would you like to change? And when they ask this Finnish woman, she actually says, like, you know, for a lot of the positive things, she says things like, oh, you know, we're very like individual minded, you know, like we don't have to be part of a group, which by the way, for Scandinavians is very unusual. Like, you know, we're allowed to like be our own person and be a bit eccentric. But then she does say, like, the downside is we basically don't show emotion. And so sometimes when I would go to other countries and I would see like families hugging and stuff, I would sometimes think, I wish that was me. And it's like, if you know that, by the way, that's just how they're going to be. So it doesn't even mean, by the way, if you see Sonny, if he's got like a Terminator glare on, that doesn't mean he doesn't like his teammates. You'll just never know. It's locked away in the Fortress of Solitude. We'll never know what he feels. So then keep going down the line. Rops is 17 years old and comes from Estonia. This is a guy who's going. You have to give him a few years to grow into his personality. Who he's going to be as a teammate. He can't be coming in calling shots as that 17-year-old. Chris J. Chris J. I'll just finish up quickly. Chris J. has never had any success in his career until about like a year ago. Remember, even with Nico, they were barely ever getting good finishes. So he's like a journeyman who's gone through all the shit times. I think he's actually just happy to have good times as they are now. But he's the in-game leader. He's not the star player. He can't be calling shots. And then Stiko was being depressed for the last 8 months because every idiot tells him to kill himself after he loses after they lose a map, you know. So there's the Mouse Spots team. You can see it's not the most fucking fun, loving time, is it? You know,
oh my God. Yeah,
not bad breakdown.
They all have like a very clear reason why they are the way they are. For sure, like it's
That's
obvious.
an underrated aspect in teams, isn't it? It's like not just role balance and style, but like personality balance. You know, because you don't want too many of them. We always used to mock NA teams like back in Moses' day if they were only like rah guys where everyone was like woo. Because like the problem is if you only have those guys, then when your team's getting wrecked, you tend to have no morale whatsoever. You need like a mix of the two. You know, you want some of them for when it's working, but you want like a guy who's like ice cold as well for when it's like, you know, like he takes over the game when it's not going. Like you kind of want a balance of both. Yeah, but obviously no one's recruiting for that, unfortunately. You know, it's kind of it's an abstract concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just might be a level of comfortability for their personalities, not to have like somebody be so like invasively extroverted or something with them or something like that. But like it's so weird because I was watching I made this video about Rops a long time ago, and I watched all of his like FPL VODs when he was a nobody in FPL and everyone thought he cheated. And even then he was like would never rage. He would just calm, never got tilted, never got too excited when he won. And I asked him, he's like, yeah, I just never really get mad or
which
like
if you remember,
like, how?
What was hilarious was, if you remember, Launders, because he did that, that's also what made people think even more that he was cheating, because they thought, well, that's why he didn't react. He has a wall hack, so he knew that guy was there. Yeah. Which is like, I mean, first of all, if you have a wall hack, just pretend you can't see him. I don't know why you would be going, well, I could see him there. Like, oh, wait, no, I couldn't. Shit. Like, you know, like, that, you'd be giving the game away a bit, wouldn't you? Like, and secondly, what sort of mad circular logic is that like? Well, he didn't react. And I know he has a wall hack. Therefore, the fact he didn't react means he has a wall hack. It's like, I'm not sure that really checks out.
Why have they given him like a wall hack from like 2002 OGC where you could like you could just permanently see everyone through the walls? Don't we have more? I keep being told the wall hacks nowadays have like 7th bullet accuracy and you can't detect it.
No, he can just see like
on and shit.
He can just see that like green girder sticking through the wall when the guy's crouched behind.
Oh fuck me.
No, but actually, to go back to the original point, I actually think you've maybe got a point on that. I hadn't really thought of that much. Because here's the thing, I guess the reason why I didn't think of it is because when I viewed the Mouse team, the reason why I said they shouldn't make a roster move is because I understand now why they think we have to make a move to get to number 1, because they've been like top 4 so many times. Yeah. But to me, I still think, dudes, 6 months ago, to even make a semi or a final would have been a big deal for you. Remember at the last major, they made top 8. That was good. Like, they haven't even got to the next major. So if I were them, I would have ridden it out and be like, listen, after the major, maybe we'll make a change. But you know what? This is our chance to go deep at a major. So I thought, right, you're actually overachievers. Why are you being so critical? But to be fair, that is something where if you look at all the top teams, that's something I think they were lacking. They do lack kind of like some kind of killer instinct, like leader figure type guy. They do in a way.
Yeah, and they're going to need one eventually. I think that might be something that gets them over the next hump. I actually, when that rumor surfaced, they were going to bring Nothing to Cologne or think about bringing him up. I was actually pretty excited for that. But I don't know. I just think if you're a Mouse Sports organization, I'll tell you right now, if Sonny or Rops ever comes to you and says, listen, we're going to, it's us, it's one of us, or, if it ever comes down to one of those two players or Oscar, just take Oscar out. For all those reasons we listed, he's 28. You have these young stars. You're set for the next 3 or 4 years on Riflers. Yeah.
Here's a roster move I'll run by you here, okay?
All right.
I don't know what... here's the thing. I don't know what the Mouse side of it would be. Like, to be fair, they've got a lot of angles they could go with. Like, actually, to be fair, when you've got Sonny, when you've got Robs, you have a connection to tons of players that you wouldn't normally have access to. So maybe you can get some young talent. That'd be good. Yep. Here's the move you do in terms of why Oscar would leave, why you could convince him to leave, and why it would make sense for where he would go. Are you ready for the straight fire roster move?
Okay, yeah.
North just won a tournament using a stand-in AWPer, and they spoke English while they did it. Put Oscar in North, where they haven't had a true star AWPer ever. They had Cajun B, who they made do it, and he never should have been a full-time AWPer. They had Mertz, who had a lot of problems. He's still a very young player. He's adapted to put Oscar in that team. But here's the thing. Because you're going to give him MSL will set the whole game up around him. He'll get set up to go into the spot. He'll get set up to have that shot. Someone will be watching his flank. He'll feel comfortable then. And, as I've said, they're both emotional cunts, and it'll be hilarious on the face cams. There you go. They can also just get together and go,
he brought it back.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
So
they can also just get together and go,
that's why you thought of this roster move. And then he backwards rationalized it and it actually sounded
exactly.
good.
Listen, I've always said this. This is one thing that I never get credit for, Launders. My banter, whether it's shit or not, always does tie into the analysis. That's true. I don't just come out of nowhere. I don't just go like, right, so big versus FaZe. I don't just go, Robban's kind of ugly, isn't he? Like that. There'll be no significance to that. I make the point work, Anyway,
it's
you're
true.
right, I did tie it in.
You don't sacrifice the shit banter for the analysis. We always appreciate that.
And then can Mousesports grab Mixwell? Maybe. Do we still like Mixwell? I like Mixwell.
Isn't he on his Spanish team now?
Isn't
he? He's sent out to Spanish team now, isn't he?
He is. But here's the thing.
Could you
do with that is
how long do you think that lasts? How long do you think that lasts?
Yeah.
As I already said, I think it lasts until they just do nothing and they don't qualify for any lands and they realise, come on, it's one thing trying to build up the scene, but I can't do it all myself. But here's the thing, I hadn't thought of that angle, Launders. Actually, Mixwell to Mouse isn't a bad move. A guy who's totally fluent in English. By the way, by all rights, has a fabulous team attitude. All the teammates I've heard him play with say the great to play with. Very versatile. Will play whatever you want. To be fair, he doesn't really suit the whole aspect of he's going to be a leader person. He's not really that kind of guy. He's more laid back. But then again, to be fair, if anything, that's what you want. You're bringing snacks in for. So might even work. That's not a bad move, actually. Yeah, not bad.
All right. Well, I like that we just speculated roster moves from Mousesports. No indication anything's coming. But I just don't know.
Both sides of the deal then agreed it was a good deal, and a third party has to now sit out and release their best player.
Do we get paid
say so? Yeah, where's our finder's fee on all three sides of this?
Oh, it's so fucked. Yeah, I don't know about this Mousesports team. I don't feel good about them. I think they'll do all right. I don't think they're going to drop off a cliff or anything. They'll be like a Legends team, top 8 at the major, but I don't see them getting top 4, risking into the final or anything like that, kind of edging on that.
Is this one of the weakest top 8s for a major that we've had? Where
you mean aside from PGL Krakow?
No, sorry. For teams that will retain this spot, in terms of total competition before going into the major.
The legend spots, you mean?
Yeah.
I have it. Probably.
It seems very weak.
Well, it's obviously helped by the fact that Cloud9 hit the self-destruct button the week after they won the major.
Strike is in there, Moses, who almost certainly are not retaining a fucking legend spot.
Is that the QB Fire team or whatever?
Fire, yes. If there's one thing I can go ahead and say, and no, I'm not going to say I'm going to eat a piece of fucking clothing. It's because I'm not going to be held accountable for
Shout out to our boy Vince.
Exactly, yeah. He made a classic mistake there. Vince, you think I'd still be alive if I went around saying stupid shit like I was going to drink bleach if someone won a game or something, you idiot? No.
I will do a Tide Pod challenge.
Yeah, I know. Why are you doing that, you idiot? Do you know the best part about that, by the way, Moses? I don't know if you know this, Launders. Because obviously, you can't actually physically eat a shoe. Some of the materials can't be digested or whatever. They might kill you. It's got rubber in and stuff. So as a result, Vince naively thought, well, I'm sure the people who I said this to are reasonable. So what he did was, first of all, he did a Reaper chili challenge, insanely hot. By the way, he can't even handle heat, so it was wrecking him. Then he did some other challenges because they were complaining. So he was like, right, I'll do more. So now he's done about 4 forfeits, by the way, all of which might be worse than eating a shoe. But everyone, anytime he posts on Reddit, people still like, where's the shoe?
The shoe.
So it's and the worst thing is he's not one of those guys who can ignore Reddit comments. So he's always replying, begging them please stop wrecking me. I can't eat a shoe.
That's hilarious. But look at this top 8. I actually could not come up with a 8th team that I thought would make. So, the Givens, right? Givens, FaZe. Sorry. I don't think Cloud9 will retain their... I don't think Cloud9 will retain their spot. I don't think they're even on the short list for me.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, sorry. If
you think they're going to get top 8 at the major, Moses?
Yeah,
are we saying who's going to get top 8 at the next one, or who's
saying which of the legends of the last major
will retain?
Will get legends next
I got you. All right, I got you.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of just saying I don't even know the top 8 in general for who's going to be in the playoffs this major.
Oh, right. Okay. Somewhere between the two, apparently.
Yeah. So the Givens, you have FaZe, Navi.
Well, here's the reason why, Launders, is because think about some of the teams that are technically ranked top 10, but because the scene's so weak in certain areas. Because here's what's weird, is that it's very rare. Here's the thing: the entire scene can't be weak. It just doesn't work that way. So what it really tends to have happened at the moment, as far as I can see, is like places like, let's say 4 to 7 are incredibly close, like a lot of parity. And then places 8 to 13 also have a lot of parity. So like the top, obviously Astralis is amazing. FaZe Clan definitely could be very good. Navi's a beast. But yeah, beyond that, it's like, it's not that they're all shit. It's like they're just too close together. And they're clearly a level below those top teams I listed, like those top 3. So I agree with you. For the top 8, it's tough to pick. Because, okay, let's just say you put those 3 in first of all. Okay, yes, Astralis, FaZe, Navi. We can probably bank on them, right? Almost everyone else is a gamble, right? Because think of some of the teams in the top 10. Big, North, MIBR.
You could probably give Liquid a spot because they did consistent
but then again,
top
Liquid's
twos.
bombed a few tournaments though, so even
They lost
then
the finals to Astralis. Like they lost 2 big finals to Astralis. That probably would have, if like they won those tournaments, that probably would have been like, all right, they're solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've lost to Astralis a lot, haven't they?
Like you almost have to give a spot to MIBR considering the competition for like 7th and 8th for the major. Because I would say you got FaZe, Navi, Mouse Sports, Liquid, Astralis, and then like Fnatic, MIVR, and then like some kind of weird toss-up between like Space Soldiers, G2, Renegade, something like that. Like I don't even know who.
North,
I guess.
they've got to be in there. I mean, here's the thing.
Yeah,
the thing about
so.
North is like they are the ultimate team right now, where they never look good when they win, but they still get wins somehow.
Yeah. Even Optic actually probably be competitive at this point for.
I feel like
Not bad.
I haven't seen North in a long time at an event that I mean, they were at Cologne.
I haven't watched them either. Yeah, like,
They narrowly lost to MIBR at Cologne in the lower bracket. They beat Team Liquid there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I think most of their games might have just been on the other stream that I didn't get a chance to catch. I feel like I haven't seen them play in ages.
You have to understand, now Moses is in a power duo with Pansy. He picks the games he does. You know, he doesn't have to come around like those hardworking guys like you launders, you know.
He'll get there one day.
Good.
Visa was the first step.
Yeah. But I think, okay, well, yeah, North is definitely a good pick. I mean, they're also a team that's probably going to play well against good teams as opposed to just like a team who's like, oh, they're pretty good. But
you want to know who I really like at the moment that I've really enjoyed watching play that I think should have gone farther at E-League and I think is going to be pretty dangerous as time goes on is Fnatic.
Okay. Fnatic. Yeah. Crims is back. I've really enjoyed watching them, and they have they have Draken on the op, or Draken on the op, and they have JW now going on the rifle. I think that's been a pretty cool change. I think Exist is looking way better than he did in NIP. That little time in phase kind of helped refresh him a little bit. I think we're seeing some of the individual. All we need now is Flusha getting back to his lifty ways, and then we're all set for another major title run, I think.
And to be fair, like one thing that like there's certain trends that do hold, and if you look at the majors, say what you like, Flusher and JW have always had at the minimum decent performances. Like, because if you notice, even the last few, they always overperform. They're always making fucking playoff. It's been ridiculous, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that team. I think they should have beat Mouse Sports in that semi or in that. I think it was quarterfinal at E-League, and that would have been awesome. But I think that's gonna be a team that I would put in the top 8 at the next upcoming major, barring any kind of collapse throughout this player break that causes them to just disappear. But I think that's a team that you certainly have to have on your radar at the moment.
Because actually, when you were saying that there about North, that's actually the concern I have when we're trying to figure out something like this, Launders, like who's going to be top 8, etc. Because like you're saying, it's not even really about your ranking. It's about, like, for example, I think at a major, you have to be able to beat some of the top teams to just make the top 8. Now, in theory, you don't. Like, in theory, in one of these systems, you could just get an easy team. But the problem is, as we've seen in Swiss systems, it's not even really about how good you are. Like, almost, it's very difficult to actually go 3-0. And it's very difficult to even win all the matches you're supposed to. So usually you're going to lose one you shouldn't. And then you probably have to win one later against some better team. And we see these weird sort of everyone's paths of Swiss systems in the past, although I am looking forward to this Buchholz system and see if it changes this. Everyone's path in the past has been very weird. So the problem is, I'm with you. I could actually see a team like a North getting the odd upset. Whereas, actually, to be honest, even though they're ranked highly, I look at teams like NRG, NIP. I don't think these teams are going to beat the top teams. Like, I think even though like NRG's ranked high, I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs, mate.
No, they're not even in the major.
Oh,
actually.
yes, I forgot about that.
They messed up at the minor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, then they're
Okay,
definitely
wait,
not. I've called that one.
Yeah, because they did so well at Shanghai. It was like, oh my god, they're going to do great at the major. But
they didn't even make it to the qualifier.
They were in the minor and they finished fourth.
The fuck?
They lost to E United in Complexity, I think.
Oh, that's
Or was
right.
it-
I
or
remember
was it
watching
Swole
that.
Patrol? I can't remember. What the two
No,
of those,
it was Complexity and
I think United as well. Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah,
that nuts? And by the way, that was the most wide open. Remember, that was the one where fucking your boy Hiko's back.
Oh,
Hiko
yeah, he
made
is
it
back.
Yeah,
there.
Rogue. Yeah.
He is back.
Literally the ultimate team of misfits. Hiko,
Sick.
Ricky, Sick, Vice, who you haven't even heard. He's a never was. Never mind, has been. Like,
And Cadian.
Vice and Cadian, there we
Cadian
go.
of all people.
And if that lineup makes it out of a minor over you, seriously,
eating?
fuck your life.
Yeah.
Just fuck your life, seriously. Wake up
That
every
makes me
day,
so
Daps,
happy.
look in the mirror and just say, that was me. That was all me.
How did they fuck that up?
And remember, minor format, of course. Once you get in the playoffs where they were, double elim best of three. So they lost 2 best of threes. Can't even complain after that, can you?
No, you really can't.
You can't just be like,
They blew it.
what about best 3 out of 5? You can't just come out like that, can you? Like, you're like a pro team with like mad salaries, win all the tournaments. Hey, come on, man, give us a sporting chance. Like,
Just getting absolutely battered. Oh, God, that sucks.
also, do you want to know what's insanely depressing, Moses? Is that's an example of a tournament where if I was their coaching staff, you better be studying those VODs like the fucking secret to Jesus' return is in there. Because when you actually look at their stats for the tournament, none of their star players underperformed. Like nobody had bad stats.
They just
It's
lost.
it's one of those ones where you must have just misplayed the game completely.
You're gonna be the coach from Miracle on the Ice with the whistle.
Yeah.
Just keep blowing it every single time, making them rewind the demo, watching it over and over.
Well, I mean, that would be Daps, right? Daps and Midge, just keep blowing it over and over every time. Keep watching the demo with tears running down your face in the dark. Please take me back to Optic.
And just eventually puking at the end of the day.
That's another team that has that chill aura where everyone seems to be like too relaxed, and they lost games they shouldn't have.
You're right.
So
They also are a team
to win.
They're a team that I think really lack actually like a killer instinct element, because if you think about their squad, Fogley is famously super quiet. I mean, it's just who he is as a person. Daps as a leader he's a classic example of like the in-game leader that on the one hand I always praise, by the way, can set up a team, can run the tactics, can do his job. Problem is he's only I call them like tacticians instead of leaders, because they're not really leaders, you know, like they're not the kind of guy who's like, guys, I need you to do this now, or like, hey, young guy, I'm gonna like lead you on in the game and like show you the ropes. Like they're not that kind of guy. And
Not like leaders of men.
and then you look at the 3 star players they've got, they're all young as fuck. They're all like quiet dudes, you know.
Yeah, Ethan and Breeze, they're going to be good, but yeah, they need something. They need like a personality transplant. I think Cirque is going to be that kind of guy who gives them the energy. He seems like he's pretty high octane when he's having a good game, which I don't know if it's always the greatest thing to have your opera in that sense, but whatever. I think he's sick. I think Cirque is going to develop into something like one of the special operas that we'll be talking about for years. I think he looks great.
They've got to survive another. It seems
saying
like teams can't do it, but they've got to survive another cycle of after the major,
Oh, for
like
sure,
however
yeah.
many months.
Like put it this way, bear in mind they're not even at the major.
Yeah.
Like for sure now, bear in mind they're going to have to go through the fucking closed qualifier again to get to a minor, to maybe get, and we all know that that's not guaranteed for anyone. Like we've seen the last few cycles.
Yeah.
As if Cloud9 already wasn't going to be coming fucking hard at them with a checkbook. You surely are now, if you're Cloud9, come on. Like you need players and they've got players, and they just fucked up a major cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question, as it always is in these things, is what is the buyout and how much does NRG feel like investing in Counter-Strike? Because eventually, if Cloud9 is offering these guys, you know, just to throw out an easy number, $15,000 or like $10,000 more than what they're getting at Energy, for instance, like how those players are going to want to leave eventually as well. Be like, let me go get the big bucks.
Here's
please.
the thing, Moses. I had a shit joke before that was shit, but it made me laugh, so I'm going to say it anyway. And that's always been my rule. That's, by the way, that's actually the rule, Launders, of how me and Richard operate, both on desks and on podcasts. We have a rule which goes, even if it's shit, you never withhold the banter. You always unleash it, right? So when Moses was saying like that Cirque's going to give them the energy, right? And he was like, they've got to have a high octane game. I was thinking, right, I don't know if they're sponsored by Monster, but it's like, so what you're saying, Moses, is once Cirque unleashes the beast, he's going to give NRG that monster player they needed, because you know what? Cirque is sick I mean, sick, and bottoms up. If you remember that classic video, that's a fucking...
Dude,
that is a straight fire. Anyone who knows
is,
that reference at the end,
that is really
fire.
good.
Launders, look it up. Look up, like, Monster... Something like Monster Energy,
666.
like the devil or something, you know? Like, there's just this conspiracy woman who just breaks down why, like, Monster Energy cans are just, like, basically like the Antichrist or something, but it's so hilarious. Like, it's the sort of thing me and Anders have just, like, laughed at way too many times. But anyway, that's the shit banter. That's that part of the show out the way. So... Actually, I've got a question for you on these lines then, Launders. What do you actually think about the NRG team that's held them back then? Because on the one hand, they've overachieved in some respects. You know, they've had some pretty good line performances. They've made some top fours, some finals. What do you think holds them back? Like, what stops them being a team that, like, jumps out of this pack that we're talking about of, like, you know... Because the difference is all the other teams that are in that pack, North, MIBR... These are all, like, flawed teams. Like, they have clear flaws. Like, they maybe need a player or style change. NRG, on paper, don't need any changes, right? They've got the pieces. They've even got a great role balance. Like, one of the people I've been praising recently, because I feel like everyone ignores him because of the young stars, is that actually, to be fair, I've appreciated what Fogley's done in this team. I think he's actually been a pretty good kind of supportive player element within the squad. And when you've got young stars... That's even better to balance that out because they're not going to do that shit, you know. They're trying to frag out. That's their job. So between Daps and Fogley, I think they are the kind of the core that set up the Stars to do what they're going to do. So, but what stops them then? If they've got the pieces, what stops them becoming a better team? Do you think?
Yeah, so I think the part that's not so obvious is just that because we've heard of these players for so many years, it's so long, and Breeze has been on NRG on the roster for 4 or 5 seasons. And Ethan was on CLG for a long time. They really, just because of how bad their teams were, never got much LAN experience. And then they brought in Cirque, who's like clearly very good, but then he also doesn't have much LAN experience. So I think that in these really high pressure situations, they're like they just need to basically just attend more LAN so that they can get over some of the jitters. I heard Daps say that he didn't know exactly why they lost at the minor. You know, as versus teams they should have beat, Complexity, United, Rogue. But he said that, maybe it was the expectation that they were supposed to win. I remember like casting a demo on my stream where, you can hear dead chat once, and like they lost to Ghost Gaming with like Steel's team, and they had like, a lot of attitude with how they felt the other team was playing. Like they felt like they should win. So I think that they have, I think they all, maybe like a lot of young players do, will talk shit amongst each other and like build themselves up. And then once there's a little bit of a chink in the armor, everyone starts to look around when they start losing rounds, and they don't know how to deal with that. And that to me is just a lack of LAN experience and like knowing how to recover mentally. If maybe they struggle really badly when they lose a pistol or something. I think that can really happen to teams. So to me, it's just too many players with like so little experience who appear to be like really, really good and should be punching above their weight.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a lot of truth in that as well, because I think you have to remember also this team, and like I've done a couple shout outs to the NRG org for putting together this roster. There's a lot of risky roster pickups in this. Like obviously, no one's gonna remember that at one point these were all like players who had to join this roster. Everyone's gonna say they haven't had a roster change in X amount of months. So why are you talking about this? But Ethan was kind of cast away from CLG. No one wanted to touch any of those players coming out of that roster except for Tarek, and like everyone was kind of diseased. No team wanted to pick any of them up. And then Breeze as well was another one of those players who had a lot of potential. Picking both of those guys up after they hadn't really shown anything, hadn't delivered on the hype that they kind of built up for themselves. Daps as an in-game leader, bringing over Cirque from Bulgaria. Fogley is a guy who doesn't, he's not going to make anyone super excited. So this roster is actually, pretty risky, but kind of necessary in today's culture of taking guys who are going to be relatively cheap and, seeing if they can live up to some of that hype. I think the next big thing for this team to get to that next level, it's surely going to be, if you're going to write, one day if we look back in history and like make a video about it, it'll surely be the trials of Daps. Can he finally get a team over the hump? Has he accomplished that yet with this team? Does this count? How far can he take it? Because his whole thing is you can get him to a certain point, but then he always gets dropped to get to that next level. And can he finally take them all the way up there? Or is he once again going to be kind of left on the wayside to watch his former team that he put together and molded go on to bigger and better things? So I think the next part of this energy story is going to be all focused on Daps. As much as they have these exciting young riflers in Upper, it's all on Daps.
Especially because, like, when that narrative that you're talking about there, The problem with it is it contains the strength and the weakness. And so the bad part about it is it does end up defining you, because we've seen tons of people who were good in-game leaders who got stuck in that. And they become the Hunden, Blade. Actually, funnily enough, people don't know this, but in 1.6, this is what threatened fucking Prolax used to do every single year, basically. They were never going to replace the people who were the in-game leaders of the top teams in Sweden. They had to bring up the talent. And it's like, for people like that, it's the most depressing career, because on the one hand, you should be celebrated. You found this talent, you molded him, you made him a star. The second he becomes a real star, though, the top team just comes knocking, they take him, and you start over again. And it's never you going up, because unfortunately, people think, as you're saying here, Moses, well, if we took you up, we only know you can do this much. Like, you're basically the guy, it's like my joke, you're the guy who gets the jam jar almost off, and then the other fucking cunt comes along and pulls the last little bit, and he goes, oh, did it? It's like, did you though? I did all the work, didn't I? Like, but you don't get the credit. So I agree. If basically, that's why it's actually a shame they're not at this major, because that could have been a great deciding point. Because if they don't do some more great shit in probably the next, like, bear in mind they've had some good runs. I'll give them 6 months. Let's say they got 6 months. If they can't do something big in the next 6 months, first of all, yes, probably some of their players get stolen away to other teams. Cloud9, who knows where the NA scene's at that point in time. But more importantly, I don't think Adaps ever gets either another chance with a really big roster, because remember, he kind of locked into this one. He got young talent that just flourished at the right time, maybe the right even combination of players, like we're saying, or got the right coach. He probably doesn't ever get the big chance. Whereas actually, I think if he proves himself with this squad, the difference is then one day he might be the leader of a Cloud9. Who knows? That could actually be his future if it works out. So yeah, it's quite a cool storyline, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is a cool storyline, and there is an argument that maybe they only did so well at Shanghai because they lost the minor. You know, because they finally had that slap in the face, that realization that no matter how good you are, you still have to like do really well every single round. No matter how much respect you have for the teams, no matter how much shit talk you had surrounding the teams before you went to play them, that you've got to go on the server and deliver. And it doesn't matter. You've got to get over the nervousness and all that stuff. And I'm sure it hurt more than anything to be that close to qualifying for the major. Probably that's got to be one of the hardest losses a player could ever deal with in today's CS, right? So
I mean, the
being
obvious
reminded
joke,
of that
though,
every day.
Isn't the obvious joke, though, that you just, I mean, that's why I'm telegraphing it already, is you just go like, well, to be fair, like, they were playing for fucking E United and Complexity. Like, it's going to be easy to play Virtus Pro after that. There we go. The old tired jokes. They all still work.
Oh, yeah,
they all
funny.
still work. Yeah.
No, but that ties in too to the inexperience thing, because I have to imagine it. It's got to be so difficult if you're one of those players who's like super young, haven't really had a whole lot of success. You beat Team Liquid, you make it to the finals of Star Series. Yeah, you get blown out of the water, but it doesn't matter. You know, that was like your coming out party. That was you on the big stage. That was like kind of a signal to the world that we have dangerous players and we can be a dangerous squad. And you body bagged a lot of good players and teams on the way there. Like, you ran them over. And then you realize this Counter-Strike circuit is so mentally insane that we have another big tournament 2 weeks after. You don't have time to enjoy your victory. You don't even have time to be like, yeah, I'm the shit. I remember like when my first top placing in Counter-Strike, like way back when, like, you know, we used to have the tournaments were spread out by months, but you know, I had like,
you had like 4 months till the next land.
I
know. The next
know.
one was the ESWC offline qualifier.
Oh, and I got to talk absolute so much shit and no one could say anything. I had 4 months, so I was untouchable because there wasn't another tournament. You don't even get a revel in it. You don't get to talk shit. You don't get to just enjoy yourself. It's like, oh, we have the minor in 2 weeks, and I don't remember who they beat at that event, but we just banged out Liquid and we banged out, let's just say, FaZe. I don't know.
In the semis,
North.
They beat them.
Yeah, they just ran over these teams, and now we're going up against E United and Complexity. This will be a cakewalk. And obviously looked over these opponents, more than likely, if not in terms of strategic or anti-stratting, but definitely in terms of attitude and approach to the game in a mental scenario. So it's one of those things. It's like a learning experience, and yeah, it's a pretty shit learning experience to have to do when it's the major on the line. But yeah, that just comes down to the younger players.
You know, by the way, that's the aspect that unfortunately people never unpack. Because one of the problems with all sports, right, is that players listen to interviews of other players, especially when it's like a post-game interview on stage, right? Because everyone's going to hear it in the arena, and if you're waiting for the next game, you're going to hear it. So the problem is when people hear how winners talk, they just think to themselves, right, I've got to get that mentality. So naively, they do the classic mistake of thinking that if you just repeat the same words that guy says, you have his mentality. Well, you don't. Because it's like the analogy I always give is, the words he is saying isn't actually the mentality. That's like the fucking fruit that's growing off the tree of his mentality. You've got to actually know what got his brain to the point where that's how he expressed himself. So a classic thing that people always say is, well, you know, when you're on top, it's harder to stay on top than it is to get to the top. Now that sounds like some sort of weird comment on like, oh, you've got to like practice a lot still, or, you know, people are going to like come gunning for you. But actually part of it is just motivation, because I know that when I've read loads of sports biographies of like some of the greatest winners and sportsmen of all time. And one of the things that like one common thread that sets apart all the greatest winners, you know, like Roger Federer, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, you know, the people who like Wayne Gretzky, the ones who win like, you know, way too many championships, like probably more than they even should have done, you know, like that's how much these guys win. What sets them apart isn't even like the talent level, or the main thing that sets them apart is somehow when they get to the top of the mountain, they win the championship, they overcome their main rival, they have to play the best game they ever played. The next day, they can literally flip a switch and go, right, start at zero again. What I just did means nothing, because there's going to be another tournament, and if I lose that, I'm going to be really pissed off. Now, when I say that, everyone probably thinks, well, they're professional sportsmen, that's what you should do. No, that's one of the reasons why I actually think that it's actually quite a clever move that in sports like the NBA, they have such a long off season. Dude, if you made like some of these teams that win the NBA title play 2 weeks later, half of those players would be out of shape. They would have been partying for 2 weeks. There was no way they'd come in shit, like fully prepared. In Counter-Strike, you have to go from a major to a tournament sometimes within a week. Like, we have some mad turnarounds. So that's why I actually have insane respect for the SKs of the world. In fact, forget just even winners. The teams that can finish top 4 every time. Astralis, SK, FaZe. That's fucking miracle working if you can just always get back to a good level again.
I mean, think of this. We just had that big segment on my VR, so I don't want to get dragged down in them, but think of the schedule they're going to have around the major. They go to, Hong Kong for Zotac, and then they fly to Stockholm for DreamHack Masters, and then they go to London for 2 weeks, I think, for the major. And straight from there, they're going to fly
Probably
to Turkey.
Just be a week, but you know.
Yeah.
That's
it. Yeah, you got me that one. You
always
got
slide it under the line. That's the thing.
That?
I keep them subtle, you know.
But
you're right, though.
They fly straight to Turkey, and it's like, that's fucking mental. Look at that 5-week stretch. This is a team that doesn't even know what they're doing yet.
They've also done that to themselves this year, though. They went to way too many events earlier, because obviously they were using that mad logic earlier. That's why I theorized that maybe they aren't like going so ham on practice and like theory stuff, because they looked like they were trying to do that thing where it's like, oh, if we just keep playing tournaments, it'll figure itself out. Like, if we just keep playing matches,
they have to get back to the theoretical shit. They have to get back. I didn't want to get bogged down in them again. Let's move on.
Sure.
I know this is probably going to be starting to wrap up pretty soon, so I wanted to ask kind of a last question. I wanted to know where you guys think someone like NBK is going to go, locked into his little contract.
I am so like.
Where would you like to see him go?
I feel like Cloud9 is probably an opportunity. I think him over Apex to Cloud9, but I don't know that like they'd win a major. I mean, I feel like if you're Cloud9, you're only thinking about that. So I'm not sure outside of that. I mean, you know, maybe if Olaf disappears again or something, there's a room for him on FaZe. I don't know, man. G2 was probably the best chance for him to be the best player he could be, and now I am very pessimistic about both his and Apex's future. Even though I think they're great, like I don't know what team they could fit into.
Right, here's how it goes. I'll give you 3 different ways, Moses. I'm like old school Tracy McGrady before his back started, and I can give it to you any way you want. Inside, outside, crossover, dunks, everything. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere in the playoffs. So then again, I guess I'm like Tracy McGrady. You don't see me at majors, do you? So just do that. There we go. Just win my conference. I've got a lot of division banners though. So right. Anyway, so here's the way I'll go. First way is what's like a likely way. So a likely way probably is the Cloud9 move. They need a player, especially if they need some veteran players. They don't want to just pick up a random. If they can pay the money, I know Jack can definitely get the money if he wants to. It's a question of if he wants to pay enough. I don't think he actually has to pay 800k, by the way. The whole point of that is that's basically like saying, negotiate with me, but you're going to have to pay a lot. So whatever he has to pay, it might even be worth it. Because here's the thing about MBK. I know he seems like a vet, but he's actually still reasonably young because he started so young himself. Like if I had to guess, I would guess he's like 26 maybe. Still got a bunch of years left. And crucially, unlike other players,
younger.
Maybe he's 25, who knows? But he's also one of those guys where he's never lost motivation. Like he legit can just keep going and keep going and keep going.
He's 24, Duncan.
That's insane, isn't it? I think I'll experience this guy.
That is nuts. Holy shit.
Yeah. By the way, it was on one of the best teams ever in Source. That's how long he's been playing. So then let's go to the other two. The second one is like, where should he go? Now, where should he go? I'll tell you quite honestly, it's what Launders said. He should probably go to FaZe. When I look at FaZe, they've got so much fucking talent, so many amazing players. Carrigan's a great in-game leader. I think a player like MBK would be so perfect for that team. Like, veteran player, great mindset, wants to be a supportive element, facilitate other people, can do whatever you need. I think that puts that team up the top.
Olaf isn't probably isn't going anywhere. Right?
Someone has to leave. So either Guardian has to retire or all that stuff, something like that has to happen. So I agree. So now here's the one of what I want to happen, because that is one thing you did ask, Moses. Now, if you know the way I deal with things, unlike with my public persona on desks, because on desks, right, in theory, I don't actually have any power over anything. I'm just saying shit, right? So I am very blunt there. But what I learned behind the scenes was, you don't ever berate players privately. You don't not that I actually did that, but you don't. You're not going to get they're not going to respond to that. For example, like if you argue with a player privately and tell them you're doing this all wrong and your whole style's wrong, they're never going to fucking thank you for that. And if anything, even if they fail, they'll do some mad shit like, well, you just took my confidence away. So it's like, it's not even worth it on any level. So what you do instead is you do like Game of Thrones style political intrigue. You set up the dominoes the way you want them, and then you start just nudging people in certain directions with comments, so that it just eventually a move happens and they end up thinking they wanted the move to happen. So all I'm going to tell you is this, Launders. Months and months ago, when that first interview happened where NBK got to become the in-game leader of G2. And remember, they had an interview with Shocks, and he said, I have to go and get this wrist surgery, but Carlos has told me that if this NBK lineup doesn't work out, then I can make a lineup, and I'm going to make a lineup of me, Smiths, and Existence, and then we don't know the others, but I'd like it to be Kenny S, and I would have picked Body, but he said no at the time. Do you remember that's what he originally said? So basically, this G2 lineup. Now, when all this went down, everyone was saying, but why not MBK? Because a lot of people maybe didn't understand that not only does MBK not get along with Shocks personally, but he also didn't want to play under Existence. It's not even about personality with him. He just didn't like his style of play, and he thought it wouldn't work anymore. So here's what happened. And Existence himself at that time did a comment, I think on stream, where someone said to him, what would your dream French lineup be? And because he's just a legit guy, he didn't just say the lineup that he knew he was going to make. He actually said the same lineup, but with NBK instead of Body. He said, I would pick NBK for that spot because he's the best bomb site anchor in France and he's always been known as that. So here's what's interesting. At that point in time, there's only two people left to convince. There's Shocks, who, for whatever reason, thinks NBK is stopping or something. And there's NBK, who said he won't play with Existence. Well, you know what? All I do is, right, when I'm talking to MBK, when I'm talking to the other ones, I just say this. I say, listen, I hope it works for your team. I hope it all works out. But you know what? If it doesn't, don't worry, man. Like, you got your chance. And besides, everyone knows how valuable you are. Like, I don't know where we're going to go. Maybe in 6 months, the best French team is the Shocks G2. And you know what? Eventually, he'll regret that. And he'll have to come to you and say, listen, actually, we need you, Nathan. Like, we're okay. But, look at by the way, basically what's happened now. Look at our team. Like, I'm not fully online yet. Like, everyone's still getting everything together. We can't have, like, Body, Existence and Smiths in one team. Something's got to break. So then I said to him, listen, the door will always be open for you. That's all I said. And then I just waited, right? And an interview came out a few days ago. And this interview, Launders, NBK says in it, right? First of all, he shills for NA and says that he thinks NA is like a region with, like, players play for passion. That's him saying, like what I said initially there, Jack, please get the checkbook out. Like, that's him saying that. But after that, he also says, and this is what's so amazing, right? Remember, nothing's happened in between. He hasn't played with anyone. He's just been sat on the bench. He then says, when someone says, like, who do you think should be like the in-game leader of the best French team, or who do you like as an in-game leader? And he says, I think the in-game leader should be Existence. Or me, but if not me, Existence. And it's like, I was just sat back like the fucking, like, okay, well, maybe you don't know this, but there's a scene in the comic book Watchmen, a very legendary comic book, right, where the main villain, who I won't spoil what he does, etc., and there's just a scene at the end of the book where he just stands up when he's observed his master plan come to fruition. He just stands up and goes, I did it! And that's what I felt like in that moment when I read that interview. Because I know in like 3 to 6 months, G2's going to maybe finish 9th to 12th at this major, probably not make the Legends spots. They're going to, Shocks is going to start to get back online. Kenny S is still really good. Existence's strats are working, but they don't quite have the firepower. They need a better supportive element. NBK's there. Jack doesn't want to pay the money. I'll just sit back. I'm waiting for that announcement. And when that announcement happens, I was going to say something ridiculous, like I'll just post a gif of me just jetting all over the fucking... Obviously I won't, I'll have to do something else, won't I? Like, I'll go and buy some French wine or something and just drink it like, I don't know, I'll figure something out,
That's cool. But do you think that body is the main issue?
No, but here's the problem. Launders, if you ever notice the way I break down the French scene, because, I have the advantage, I've gotten to know a lot of them personally, so I know, literally what their personal politics are and why they won't play with someone or, So I kind of know, first of all, if it's true that they won't play with someone, but more importantly, if it's it'd have to reach a breaking point before they'd kick a guy or replace a guy. So the key point to make here is, if I'm making the team, no, obviously I kick out Smiths. Why wouldn't I? But the problem is, that's not an option in this team, because this team is founded on the basis of Shocks wants to play with Smiths, and Smiths has history shared with Existence and Shocks in their best days. So unfortunately, I don't think you can kick that player. So I agree, I wouldn't do that move, but I'm just thinking of what's a viable move, like what they might do, Because, Body's the youngest guy. He has the least connection of all of them.
So G2 and teams today just have so much more power over players and where they go and stuff like that. And sometimes, we see roster changes happen, like the Astralis one with Kirby, which was the first public time where it was seemed like the players had no idea. A player went to the org and never got back to the rest of his team. It's holy shit, you guys spend all these hours in team speak together, calming and practicing.
Did you like my meme about that, by the way? I had a pretty good one. Did you see it, Moses? Because obviously Astralis just won another event, E-League Premier, won it in dominant fashion again, not even losing fucking maps again. And they've literally, they're on the verge of not only an era, but if they do it, it'll be one of the most dominant eras since fucking the original NIP or something mental. So my joke I made was, because everyone makes the very simple ABC joke of haha, Kirby's the MVP of this team or whatever. I went one step further and I had it so it was because it said, the tweet was something like Zonix, okay guys, time to go sign these contracts, because remember, he left on the day they were going to sign their contracts again, and they all thought he was going to sign for 2018. It's Zonix okay guys, time to go sign these contracts.
I did see that.
And then Kirby goes I'm sorry Glaive, I'm going to have to take my talents to North. And then Glaive goes, what the fuck? And then Kirby just goes, he goes something it was the only way. I calculated 14,605 possible outcomes. This is the only one in which Astralis wins. And then afterwards, it just said, hashtag, please, Mr. MSL, I don't feel so good. Because obviously he had to sacrifice himself, didn't he?
Yeah.
But anyway, keep going with that point. What were you going to say about the G2 and the Astralis move?
I just want to know if it's ever been really talked about that, compared to traditional sports, it's the players spend so much time talking to each other, and when they're actually in the game, they are constantly trading information and criticizing each other for the information that they convey to each other after, before, and during the matches, and that puts so much stress on those relationships, and it's probably so much harder to hold the team together, and so much more important as well that you have players that can, at least, even if they don't like each other, but at least on a professional level, work together. And I wondered how much the org takes that into consideration, and it does seem like there's a shift where they don't. I
know that the orgs don't like that, especially orgs, by the way, that are from League of Legends, because in League of Legends, they very early implemented poaching rules, which meant, these are mad, by the way, because I don't know almost any sport even that exists like this. The poaching rules there's tampering in American sports, sorry, it's true, that's what they took it from. So basically, when you sign a player for a year or whatever to play in the 2 LCS splits and maybe Worlds or whatever you make, when you sign that player, he cannot talk to another team, and another team cannot talk to him, including their players, even casually, about the possibility of him joining or someone joining your team, unless they come to the org and ask permission. And if the permission's not granted, you cannot talk to them. And so as a result, orgs run League of Legends. Orgs decide what players come, and sometimes in the off-season, players actually end up being the ones getting screwed, because what happens is they have a very, like the second the off-season starts, obviously everyone's going mad signing contracts, like, give me that player, give me that player. So it means even if you're a good player, sometimes your options are like, a window opens for a few weeks, you've got like two teams, you try to get the one you want to get on the best, if not, you get on like, it's not player decided at all. And so even though I think that that's like too extreme the other way, personally, I think that's kind of fucked up the other way, like, it definitely, I think, unfortunately, in Counter-Strike, here's the thing. On one level,
it's the other side of the spectrum, isn't it?
It does make for great games, because if you notice, players eventually do get it right. Like, they do kind of have a sense for it.
Yeah.
But then again, they change too quickly. Like, they change 6 to 9 months that you make a roster move. That's too short for a span of a sports team. How are you even going to sell a fan on that? Like, imagine if you were a Cloud9 fan and after the major. That should be where you're loving it the most. You're hating it the most. Like, LeBron doesn't just leave halfway through the season. I mean, I guess there's no analogy because you can't win the championship halfway through, but, like, it would just be so whack. So anyway, where were you going with this? Like, what were you going to do with the G2 move on that sense? Like, you feel as though, like, the org maybe should step in and pick the...
Yeah, I mean, potentially, I think, like, if you're saying it's like just the move that makes sense, and there's clearly respect from both sides now, like a mutual respect from NBK in existence as to like what the best lineup would be, and it seems like they just want to win at this point.
Yes.
Maybe there is room or makes sense for G2 to kind of step in. But yeah, I just wondered, I guess, how much power they would have to do that.
The real problem here is Shocks. And this is why, by the way, in most teams, Shocks, this is one of the first times he's gotten his way, by the way, and that's only because the NBK project failed so badly. Most times, Shocks forces an ultimatum, he's the one who gets kicked out of the team. That's why by the way, even though this is one of the greatest Counter-Strike players of all time, I believe he has been kicked from existence teams 3 times, and he's been kicked from obviously from the LDLC Envious team once. So one of the greatest players of all time has been kicked from his own team 4 times. Like, dude, people like Forrest don't get kicked out of teams. Neo, these guys, they stay there forever. You don't ever consider kicking them. So that already shows you, right, that he's a very stubborn guy. And the problem is, I can't entirely criticize him, because as a person, he's just one of those guys where, bizarrely, he doesn't have like an insane drive like Coldzera, He has to have an environment that he enjoys, and then he gets motivated. So as a result, that's why
it's very French.
It is. It's a very weird way to think of the game, because, everyone else would be like, you're a fucking professional player. But unfortunately, that's just the way he is. And the reason why I say I can't criticize him is because, to be fair, every time he has been in an environment he liked, he is fucking straight fire.
Yeah.
I can't argue with the results.
By the way, maybe that's why. Maybe that's kind of the logic behind NBK's buyout being so large. Is like, listen, I mean, because obviously,
I believe it was a possibility for the roster. That's why they keep him.
And obviously, you got to give this roster time. And I mean, on that note as well, I don't think the NBK roster preceding this failed that spectacularly. I don't think they got adequate amount of time either. So I think part of it just comes down to the fact that obviously, I think you're spending a lot of money on this roster, and it's like we're at that point now where we need some results. So now you're giving this new one a chance. You have NBK on the bench. You're not selling him. It's too high. And if you want to slot him in for Smiths, for whoever, for Body at any one point, you still have him on the bench under contract, ready to go. And you bring that in and you see if that can work. And I think at the moment, it's just kind of fishing for the right combination of French players, which for whatever reason over the past year and a half seems like the right combination of the right number of French players for a successful team is 0, because no one seems to be doing any good in that region.
G2 still beat Mouse Spots in a best of 3, beat Navi in a best of 1.
Shut the fuck up. You shut your goddamn mouth.
It's the way I've just deleted all the other results from my mind. Like, they never went to a DreamHack after that, Moses. I don't know what you're talking about. Never happened.
I don't even recall.
As far as I know, the tournament ended just before the end of that first map against Big, and I think they'd probably win the series, to be honest. They were doing pretty well.
Yeah, if I recall correctly.
There definitely wasn't a Dust 2, though. I don't remember that at all.
You know what I think would be cool for NBK, just to circle back to the original question? This would just kind of be in my head. This works. I don't know if it would actually work out. I think it'd be sick if NBK in some way, not in every way, but what if you joined Liquid? What if you brought NBK in?
Why did Liquid need so many rosters? I mean, they're good now, but like, what else? Who are you going to change now?
To be fair, it is basically the Liquid way. You just change players every 4 to 5 months. That's like
all
what
the
they've done
time
for the last 3 years.
And I've heard they're not even stable right now. Like I've heard there's players are not maybe that.
Well,
maybe
here's the
won't
thing,
lead.
Moses, maybe you can speak to this, because I've actually made this point in the past, because I actually made it, I think, to Richard about Cloud9, that this is the one time in history where it actually doesn't look like Team Liquid players even want to join Cloud9. Because people might not know this, even when Team Liquid was having amazing results, there were always roster moves behind the scenes of like, by the way, at this point, nearly every player, like, this player's going to go to Cloud9. Oh, this one wants to play with Stu2K. Oh, Automatic's going to play with this guy. Like, the mad thing is, because they were a lineup, that's actually a lineup, by the way, generally put together by the org, as far as I can tell, because they make the big buyouts. So, bizarrely, even though they've had some amazing runs and results, the one thing they never seemed to have in that team was, like, like the friendship core or whatever. They really did seem like it's fucking business. And so, as a result, it wouldn't surprise me if I heard that even after their recent good results, there's still, someone's thinking of leaving, or they might break up or something. What would you say to that, Moses? I know you know some of the guys more personally, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I can't really speak a whole lot to all of that. I haven't heard anything crazy. I know they've been dealing with a lot of issues. I know Twist has addressed it in a couple interviews. I know as well, by the way, there's always going to be some kind of discontent in a team to a degree when someone like Cold, says he wants to join your team or says he's thinking about joining your team. You're always going to be looking at, you're going to do like the side glances.
I wonder who we could kick.
Yeah, exactly. When the best player in the world wants to join your team, you're looking around and you're like, all right, well, someone's got to go. But no, I'm not advocating that Liquid makes a roster change. I'm not saying they need it. I'm just saying I think this could kind of be cool in a way when you bring NBK in, one of the most experienced players we have in the game. Still super young, as we just kind of went through. Liquid has had a lot of trouble with their mentality, and I think you bring in a leadership figure who is like very stable in terms of his mentality. He's been in every situation. He's had amazing success and he's had spectacular failures. So I think he's seen it all. He's a guy who wants to be an in-game leader. So I think if you take Nitro out and you put him in, he's going to have to move to North America anyway. So he's going to move over to the West Coast and go into the team house, where Nitro is the only player not currently living for Team Liquid. And all of a sudden you've got a guy who wants to in-game lead. You're not losing anything because it's not like Nitro's AWP is winning you any matches. You can find someone else to pick up that mantle from here and there when you do want to use the AWP. But I just think that could be a very intriguing move. And I think that'd be a benefit in a lot of ways. I mean, this is a team that struggles with mentality, that kind of cracks under the first sign of pressure in big matches, even if it's only 3 rounds in. So all of a sudden you have a guy who's going to be immune to that, who's going to teach some of the younger players how to get over that fact. I think that'd be very interesting.
There's probably a way to contextualize a lot of their losses, but it is kind of sad that Liquid as an organization, I think they've only won, like I think Elige, the only tournament he's like won on Liquid was CS Summit 2. Yeah. Isn't that insane? That is just so nuts. That's so
the worst
sad.
If you remember, their biggest crime was that even when they could get to international finals, they'd always lose the NA tournaments that were LAN. So it's like, come on, guys, you got to win one of these motherfuckers.
Yeah. No, that's like my current view of this Team Liquid roster is like eventually it's got to break. Like I know they've made a decent amount of roster changes, but like eventually you've got to win a trophy. Like you can't just be the 3rd best team in the world and not win trophies for 2 years. I mean, you've kind of been jockeying for this mantle since 2016 when they blew the lead against Luminosity spectacularly, and then obviously in Cologne when they had Simple and they make it to the finals and everything, and you've gotten so close and you've made all these great roster changes. In fact, if you look at the roster changes, they've upgraded in pretty much every single category of these. They've actually made good roster changes. It's not like they've wasted time, a whole lot of time on some player who wasn't going to develop in anything and still not lifting trophies. So I think you bring in someone like NBK who has hoisted trophies, who's won majors, who's lost to learn a lot of ways, who can teach your young guys a lot of different things about how to win, how to practice, and you give him that leadership mantle that he's publicly stated he wants the responsibility of leading a team. So I say, in a way, I think it'd be cool if Liquid were to give it to him and say, let's go.
What do you think, Launders?
Yeah, Liquid is kind of French in that regard. They're used to it, so I think
they also do wave the white flag in fucking finals.
There you go.
Only against Astralis. Otherwise, they just don't get there.
Maybe a little bit more time, just because, like, if you look at like their most recent results, they lost to Astralis in both E-League and Cologne, which is like they're so close.
And Pro League finals in Dallas.
And Pro League finals in Dallas, another second place. Yeah, so it's like I actually think that that many close losses is worse for a team than getting like a top 8 or something and like not doing nearly as good, because then you can see your potential. But what's that?
You want to know that funny thing, because you mentioned you're hearing some unrest, and I mean, I know if you look at some of the players in that team, you can kind of imagine who it would be. But did you see that interview? Actually, I'm not even going to ask that question because I don't want to be embarrassed. But that interview I did with Twist at E-League, when I asked him like what's up with his gum chewing, because he's like has a powerful gum chew when he's playing, and I mean he said it in kind of like half joking, right? But like in every joke, there's a little bit of truth where he was just like
nervous.
No, he actually said it actually helps me to stop complaining. He's like, I have to pick and choose when to stop chewing my gum to actually talk.
So the whole time,
that was a criticism.
All we needed for simple was fucking Wrigley's.
Wrigley's, a little Wrigley's.
Spearmint, double mint gum. There you go. Double the flavor, half the fucking complaining.
And it always, the commercial always had twins in bikinis, so that's a plus as well.
That was a criticism for Twist when he was up and coming and playing in Rank S and stuff. Is like people would say that he would just be really like emo on the mic, or like do that deep breath, exhale, or whatever.
If everyone in the North America is like that when you're coming up through like fucking MDL stages, so obviously it's all you're gonna learn how to be.
Yeah.
It's
right. There's two angles here. One, in terms of like MBK joining Liquid, it's an interesting one. Now, I will say, by the way, Moses, some people are going to get mad at this because I always have my finger on like the pulse of like the Reddit crowd, like rough consensus. Obviously, it's not perfect. There's a lot of different people, but you can get a rough consensus, right? And I know that a lot of people actually, even though some of them think Liquid does need a roster move, they don't want it to be Nitro, because a lot of them think like, well, they've got to all these big finals, plus like they do look like a reasonably tactical team, like their style's pretty good. So to them, they're like, right, it must be Nitro. My problem with that is I've been around longer than that. I saw Nitro when he tried in-game leading a couple of times before Zeus was their coach. I saw Nitro when Peacemaker was their coach. And I've got to tell you, that wasn't an in-game leader, and he wasn't doing a very good job. So here's the thing. I could definitely believe that he's learned some skills. And you know what? He might even be a good in-game leader. In fact, you know what? If he ends up leaving Liquid, I hope he goes to another team. I hope he goes to Cloud9 and becomes the in-game leader, shows me I'm totally wrong and does an amazing job. But I would guess, personally, that Zeus had a massive impact on helping him set up the team that way and teach him. So as a result, bearing in mind MBK has already got like the basics. NBK, if anything, needs someone to take him to the next level as an in-game leader. His few chances at it haven't been that great. If anything, that sounds like a marriage made in heaven. That sounds like it could be a good move. Now, here's a criticism of my own idea that I came up with, but I mean, this is one thing that I very strongly think Liquid is never going to beat Astralis without a strong AWPer. Liquid can beat any team in the world at the moment. Maybe we can tie this into my other point, because here's my other point, and this is going to be we're going to start wrapping up here, but there was one other aspect I wanted to bring up, which was, me and you have been complaining. I've been complaining a long time about it, where when I was talking earlier about like personality balance and like, how much killer instinct versus how much like calm player do you have? Yeah. That's one thing that Team Liquid obviously has suffered with Elige, Naf, Twists, in their own way, different ways for each of them. They're not really like leadership figures. And even though they're the best in the game, they're not the kind of guy who's going to be like you either want the guy to be like, fuck it, play our game, or like, get on my back, I'm going to carry us now. Like, oh, don't worry, I'll take care. You want that sort of thing to like fire the other ones up. Well, here's the thing. We've been saying we need someone to emerge to do that, Moses. Did you see the interview that Naf did after they beat Na'Vi in the semi-finals? Did you see this interview? Yeah, because, is that the one where he's just like, we feel really comfortable, we kind of know what to do against them, blah, blah, blah? He said that he didn't feel as though Simple is a standout player, because whenever he plays against them, he's not really doing like special rounds or anything. Now, first of all, there's two ways this can go. There's two ways this can go, Moses. Either he has just unleashed the most ferocious beast on his asshole, and the next time they play Na'Vi, you have ever... Like, he's going to get old Simple. He's going to get a motherfucker just running around with a deagle just taking his head off. Throwing pistols in the air. Or he's actually finally stepping forwards and now he's going to back up his words. I like that. There's actually a saying, I can't remember who said it, but basically, if you shit talk, like here's the thing, banter and shit talk can be different. Like sometimes if you banter, it's for fun. If you shit talking like legit, like, we're competing and I'm like, hey, I beat you the last 3 times. What's good about that is it actually then puts my back against the wall again. I have to then beat you the next time, because even if I beat you the last 3 times, if you win like the next one, especially if the next one's like the major, you get all the bragging rights after that because I've talked all the shit, haven't I? So I actually hope this puts Naf's feet to the fire in that sense. That's so funny because literally at Evo, Leffen beat HBox, who was like up in sets like 7-1 or something this year.
just beat him every single time, and Leffen will walk up stage and not shake his hand. And then at Evo, Leffen wins and beats him. And it's like the only one that people are going to remember is the Evo win. It's the last one. It's the biggest one.
Mainly because they're all just button bashing anyway.
I was wondering.
It's hard.
Yeah, obviously,
You just triggered him.
sarcasm.
You just tilted him.
It's like launders. It's the same as like COD players. I know what COD's actually like, but I always say to the COD players, like, yeah, but the thing is, though, why do you all play with auto aim?
I mean, that's not untrue, though.
No, but you know what I mean. It's not obviously like I'm purposely doing it as though like it's mad ignorant. And then it's like, what are you talking about? We able to? It's like, yeah, all right, mate. You have fallen into the bait.
I was wondering why Simple made that tweet where he was like, because of this interview, I will practice harder than ever to single-handedly demolish your team. Exactly. And I was like, and I hadn't read the interview at the time, so I'm thinking like, Naf just said he like knows how to play against Navi. What's Simple doing getting so fucking pissed off for? That's so epic. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the case of him turning into the badass, because I don't think Naf translates that kind of a thought in the interview into, you know, trying to pass that kind of a mindset or emotion onto his teammates when the games go live. You know, like I don't think that same thing translates when the game goes live at all.
That was just more like him, like
silent a little bit in the interview. Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I don't think he's that good. You want this shit? You want some of this shit? Yeah, where was this interview done? Was it in like a hotel room at 3 a.m? Was it, was it in the press room? Where was this? Were there towels under the doors? Yeah. I need to know all I need to know is the environment, nothing else.
Was the shower running? Oh, the tricks.
Do you know what the saddest thing was, is I've realized now. Here's the real way that we've actually lived the North American pro gamer dream, is that we've now reached the point where pro gamers could take part in that activity. But even if they got fined the $200, that's not even that much for their salary now.
Oh, they just don't give a fuck, do they?
This is the true dream. Weekend Warriors, where you at? This could have been your time.
Right? Well, the best thing is now they got those little fucking vape pens, don't they? So you don't have to like detach the fucking smoke alarms in the hotel rooms anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. There are no such things as vape pens. None of them are coming into countries. None of them are getting around. And I've never tried one. So teetotal for life. That's me doing me launders. We'll be there at, I don't know, Evo, whatever the fuck that shit's called. Cheering on Wiggly Tough or whoever that's actually the name of a Pokemon, but whatever.
You're so mad close. Names, I know. Part.
Is the one that's close to that?
Jigglypuff.
Oh,
you said
right,
Wigglytuff.
Yeah,
evolution.
Whatever. I believe that's another Pokemon. Maybe it's an evolution of Jigglypuff.
Yeah.
Whatever. No, will you fucking get your priorities right and learn your Pokemon? Anyway, this video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Eddie Wingfors, Daniel Yordanov, Robert Baxter, Travis Greb, Kyla Harris, James Harding, Caesar, and special thanks go out to Matt Shakowski and Jerky's Minion in particular. Want teasers for my upcoming content? How about asking me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want to take part in a discussion about esports with me? How about suggesting a topic or a guest for my content? Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today.